All right, boys and girls, it is time. Time to go live. This is the Lock One Stop Shop. Auto just disconnected. Okay, good. My name is Taryn. I'm your host today, and today we are going to be talking about some Warlock stuff with some pretty cool guys. First off, got some technical difficulty. Okay, good. Now we have sound going. All right, first off, with me today is the one and only Gato. Say hi to everyone, Gato.
Hi guys.
All right. Gato's here yet again to make sure we're not spouting a bunch of crap in terms of Sims and everything. With us from the land of freedom, we have Zyronic. How you doing, bud?
Well, I'm doing great, man. Early morning.
Casual noon.
Yep. That gamer schedule.
And last but not least, we have our first no webcam guy today. We have the one and only Deep Shades from Method. How you doing?
Good morning, everyone. I'm doing good.
Look where you're at. Okay. So, today we got a pretty good lineup for you. We're gonna talk about some basic stuff involving kind of balance. We're gonna go over some Mythic Plus stuff. We're kind of aiming for just some nice broad strokes, help you guys, help people out, make sure it's kind of on the same page as to what's good, not good in Mythic Plus, and we're gonna talk about some rating because that's a thing also. So, how is everyone?
I'm doing great. I'm getting my World Quest grind started early.
I did already the World Quest grind and I'm doing the Island Expedition grind. Equally fun.
Oh yeah.
I'm already done for the day. I'm gonna play some Path of Exile after this.
Oh, I'm jealous.
All right, so let's go ahead and we'll talk about this a little bit. So one of the things that has happened over the since Legion has or Legion, wow, BFA has launched finally, which has been pretty interesting. Lots of really and we've also gotten some balance in some interesting things about the artifact. Gato. You're muted.
Wait, what artifact?
Artifact. The new the BFA artifact. You know what I mean. Part of Azeroth.
Oh, whew. You're talking about Azerite traits. I'm like, there's a new.
Yeah. No. Heart of Azeroth. Let's talk about it.
Uh, there are some really disgustingly overpowered traits. Uh, Demo traits are pretty bad in general. It's what we found. Just like all of them, they're all completely worthless garbage. You just pick the generic like damage proc ones for that spec. Destro has like one really powerful one. It's called Crashing Chaos. Outside of that, most of its traits are like mediocre. Crashing Chaos makes it so when you pop Infernal, your Chaos Pulse just do a ton of damage for 30 seconds. So that's cool. Then Affliction has two traits that we're hoping don't get completely gutted because they might be problematic. So Racking Brilliance and Inevitable Demise are both incredibly powerful for Affliction right now.
Good. So yeah, it's been. I've got myself at least one stack of I. Drain Life suddenly deals like more damage than everything else. Fun. Um. So, anything else been going on? I know has Demo finally been fixed? Is it playable now? Because I know for like the past 3 weeks, it's just been completely like every hot fix has had a demonology fix.
In general, it's better than it was. A lot of the bugs have since been fixed. Like Vile Fiend actually works now, which is cool. It doesn't just constantly despawn anytime you summon it in a dungeon. Among some other things that got fixed, but the big thing is Implosion is still really buggy. sometimes when you use Implosion, if mobs are moving around, Implosion will target where the mob was instead of where they are at the time that it hits. So it'll just hit nothing if the mobs move too far away. That kind of seriously hinders its ability to be
Right.
good in Mythic Plus. But I think once they fix that, it's in a decent state. It should be, for all intents and purposes, it should be like fine for rating as far as bugs go. It's just like Implosion is still buggy.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad. Zyro, have you played anything but Affliction since launch?
No, see, I got all that done in beta. So no, I've only been playing Affliction on launch. And I know that a lot of people have been playing other things like Destro and Demo are pretty viable to just do burst AoE damage and in dungeons right now because things die so quickly. But I mean, I don't really care. Affliction does just fine.
Deep Shades, I know you were playing Destro a little bit a couple streams ago that I saw, but have you stopped?
Well, I mean, for the non-important content right now, I still play it a lot because I kind of didn't want to be completely useless on Trash, and I didn't really had any of the OP traits in my Azerite gear, like the Inevitable Demise or Wrecking Brilliance, and I had some fun with the Crash and Chaos talent and the Grimoire of Supremacy. But yeah, I mean, Demonology is also fun for the current fine for the current content. But I don't know. As soon as it goes to raiding, I will definitely swap also and do the full Affliction only. So yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, it's been interesting. I don't know how we always managed to get into this state. I mean, at least it's better than the beginning of Legion where we had no specs that were viable. So that's kind of cool. So let's go ahead. So the first thing we would kind of want to do is go into some Mythic Plus dungeons, kind of help you get some interesting thoughts about that. Gato has some information that Destro is useful never. Is that roughly approximate?
No, it's all right in a lot of situations. It's like middle of the pack as far as Mythic Plus goes right now. I think it does like decent on AoE, does decent on. It does actually. If you're holding Infernal for bosses, it does really good on bosses. Not as good as Affliction, but it'll beat most of the other specs in the game for boss damage if you're playing Grimoire of Supremacy and you're holding your Infernal for boss. But I think personally, from what I've seen, the true power of the spec comes from just like applying your face to Infernal on cooldown and your group knowing how powerful it is as a cooldown and just like mass pulling every 3 minutes. Because it does a metric crap ton of damage when you drop that Infernal on an AoE pack. I think that's like the main thing that Destro brings to a group right now. But if you have like somebody else in your group already that does big AoE like a Demon Hunter or what have you, then I feel like you're pretty much just always better off playing Affliction, personally.
Zyro, how much Mythic Plus did you do on beta? I'm assuming a decent amount at least, right?
I did a lot. I did a lot of
Okay.
Mythic Plus on beta. I mean, I think I never really got to play Demo in beta because by the time Mythic Plus came out, it already gone through the 35% nerf that pretty much made it unviable. But Destro Destro before the nerfs, Destro was just hands down the best spec in Mythic Plus on beta because of what you said earlier. What Gato said earlier, the 3-minute Infernal Burst. If your dungeon group played around that, you would do obscene damage, and you still do really good damage. It still has that strength, but I feel like Affliction, especially using the Inevitable Demise traits, is going to be one of the top 3 specs for Mythic Plus pushing in general, just because of how strong its focus damage is right now.
Well, an ID especially because you can always make sure you have 100 stack going into every boss, and you just
That
kind
too.
of delete.
Yeah.
So, and then Deep Shades, have you even touched Mythic Plus much on beta, or did you just focus on trying to get world first 120?
Well, I geared up at some point on a beta, but that was when M Plus wasn't really out. So I just played demo when like the M0s were basically out, when it was still OP. But I mean, I can agree with the other two. Like, many people kind of underestimate right now how much the Infernal actually does on AoE just by itself, which makes it really good. But I just guess for actual M plus pushing, then on the live servers, I don't know, you have just so many other classes which basically destroy your synergy with the Infernal and like don't really allow you to shine in what you are good at. So that Affliction will become the spec that you need to play to be actually successful in it if you wanna be among the top people.
Right. So okay, well let's kind of go. I know Zyro, you did plenty of Mythic Plus, so we were gonna kind of talk about going through dungeon by dungeon here, talking about this. So we're gonna look at Siege first. Was there any good tricks or anything like that you saw?
There's a couple gateway skips that you can do. Skipping over the water in a couple places, skipping some trash packs. I know Shelley, who isn't here, has some videos on his Twitch about that, and he also has just a video going over all of them on his YouTube. So if you want to check those out, those are pretty cool. Really, I mean, a lot of the affliction tips and tricks right now for Mythic Plus come to cheesing your inevitable demise stacks. Like, where can I get more stacks to do more damage with?
Right.
Like, for instance, on the last boss in Siege, you can dot the boss at the start just for free extra stacks. A lot of people don't do that when I watch their streams, and it makes no sense to me. So you have dots on 3 things, and you're stacking your ID faster, and you do a lot of damage with your drain life. There's really no fleshed out like easy tips and tricks right now.
Okay.
It's kind of just all damage based.
Fair enough. Gato, do you got any comments on Siege? I mean, it's out on. We can at least see the Mythic 0 if there's anything that you noticed in there that's pretty handy.
Nothing outside of like the generic stuff, like don't blow your cooldowns at the start of the second boss because she phases. Hope that you don't get fixated by Sergeant so you don't do any damage for the entire time. But
Right.
outside of the general meme stuff, I think that it's a pretty good dungeon for creeping death in general. I don't know if we want to. I feel like pretty much just Ironic covered it for most of the dungeons here. We can point out some places where you can do gateway skips. We can point out places where you can cheese absolute corruption really well. And then outside of that, you're pretty much just looking at like a one talent choice, and that's really all that's going to change from dungeon to dungeon in general. So I kind of want to maybe just like with every dungeon talk about how we feel Creeping Death and Dark Soul Misery match up. Because for people that don't know, Affliction pretty much uses the exact same talents for everything right now. Death Bolt, Absolute Corruption, Phantom Singularity, and Haunt. And then there's like some leeway in the last tier where you can either go for more trash damage with Creeping Death or you can go for more boss damage with Dark Soul Misery.
And I guess at what point do you think that the other thing is at what key level is the trash damage can actually be relevant for AF compared to your mage or your rogue who's just exploding everything? I mean, is it not until your upper keys, or is it only a fortified thing?
I think it's a lot sooner than you'd think.
Really?
I think, well, especially with our current gear levels, you're probably going to see a lot of use out of Affliction with Creeping Death, especially on even like 5 keys. Like already now, if you're in a trash pack where your entire Phantom Singularity goes off, you're going to be competing with almost every other DPS spec outside of the insane sustained AoE classes like Unholy DKs or Demon Hunters. You're probably never going to compete with them in AoE. But most other classes you'll do pretty similar damage to, as long as you get your full ramp up time.
All right. So Siege then is there enough trash then to make PS less viable, or what do you think?
Creeping Death.
Creeping Death,
Yeah,
I mean,
Creeping Death. Yeah, Creeping Death more viable.
I think due to the nature of the fights in Siege, Creeping Death is better because there's no real like pure single target fight. Only one of the bosses is pure single target. So Creeping Death is probably just better in general in that instance. I don't really see using Dark Soul being a viable strategy in there.
Yep. Cool. And then I guess Freehold is our next one. What do
Feels bad, man.
you... That bad, huh?
Well, no, it was really fun back when we had 3 training dummies, and then they removed them, and now I feel bad. For anyone who doesn't know, at the start of the expansion for all of beta, Freehold used to have at least 2 training dummies, usually 3, in the instance that you could apply corruption to with absolute corruption, and that would ramp your inevitable demise from anywhere in the dungeon. So you just had like infinite drain life, and they nerfed that last week. But
Such a shame.
I don't know. For Freehold, I feel like personally, I feel like Dark Souls pretty good in that key in general. Largely because of like the I think the thing that puts Dark Soul Misery over the top of Creeping Death is actually the Turtle Boy. Before the third boss, you get the Turtle Boy, and he actually has a lot of health on higher keys from what I saw. And it might take you well long enough that you have a second round of cooldowns. But
Well, another thing about Freehold is that the general strat in Freehold is you get about 70% of your mob count, and then you use a mage to cheese the last 30% right before the last boss. There's a lot less trash, making Creeping Death a lot, less important. So, and in addition to that, in addition to the 4 bosses, you also have a mini boss that has a lot of health. So yeah, Creeping Death is a little more devalued in that instance because of that.
Cool. All right. And I guess another thing to bring up on these, is there any really big like trinkets, weapons that we need to be watching for in any of these dungeons? Kind of as we're stepping through them, would be something to keep in mind.
Not from the 2 we've discussed so far now.
We also have Shrine of the Storm here. What do we got here? This is a long dungeon. This is an absurdly long dungeon.
It's not as long as you'd think it is. There's a lot of skips that people aren't doing in Mythic 0 right now that make it a lot shorter. Especially if you abuse Gunshoes and Viz. It's very very quick.
And that's actually crazy that you can do that with the gunshot.
That's a thing in that? Oh my god.
That's a thing. There are some pretty nifty gateway skips in there as well that you can do to skip large just packs of trash that you would normally have to do. So Shrine is actually not as long as you'd think it is. It was actually, I think, the second highest key done on beta. We did a 14 Shrine in time on beta. I think that was the only key that we did higher than that wasn't in Taldazar was, I think, a Toldagor 15. So Shrine is actually one of the better dungeons to do.
Cool.
Especially in Mythic Plus.
What do you guys do about you've got the boss in there that removes dots? I mean, is that just the tank needs to move quickly, or is there something that you guys were doing to mitigate that other than just
it is possible to move the boss before it moves dots. You just have to be constantly moving when that happens.
Because I remember that was like first couple times I've done this, I like read so hard because you get like a 3 stack of UA going, start to Deathbolt, and then Deathbolt does no damage. Okay, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's something to be watching out for in that key. A lot of people had issues with that on Mythic 0, where they were running with tanks who didn't know about the part where it cleanses debuffs. You get that a lot with like Brewmasters cleansing your debuffs too with the thing that they do. And that always triggers people, but you should
doesn't do that anymore, which is great.
Yeah. you should make your tanks aware of the fact that if they just constantly move the dude around your dots won't be cleared, and that's a really big thing for Affliction to not have your dots reset.
What about there's the worm pack at the top of or the tentacles that pop up from the two guys at the top? Is that part of that skip, that gun skip that you do?
Well, here the thing about that is, I'm not entirely sure if Gunshoes works in Mythic Plus. It does work in Mythic 0 right now, but
Sure.
usually a Rogue Shroud will get you all the way there. So you don't need to do the Gunshoe skip, but an Invis Pot or a Rogue Shroud will get you all the way to the next boss.
What's
But yeah,
also
you can skip those two.
What's also interesting, after the first boss, I don't know if Xeronic did it already on a plus, there's this one NPC that casts like a haste rune, and you
Mhm.
can just abuse that for the first boss. If you have the balls to have like the trash and the boss active and you just don't kill it. So you keep just perma having a haste rune on the boss fight. Which
That's
speeds
awesome.
it up a bit.
And it also gives you more ID stacks. Love that.
Exactly. Or like
The best.
after
yeah.
after the first boss is this one mini boss. I don't know her name, but that also puts like the rune that reduces your damage taken, and you can abuse that, for example, for the storm elementals that are doing like the AOE that you could arguably also line of sight, but you can just stand in the rune then and still DPS the storm elemental. That's like two little things we noticed at least in M0 runs.
Cool. Those are handy things to know. Sea breeze is not a thing. Confirm? Deny?
It's
Mostly
not.
confirmed.
It's not that it's not a thing. It's not a bad staff. It's just not Biss. There's nothing wrong with the staff inherently, right?
Well, yeah, it's comparable to other weapons on average, but it's gambling, so in general, I've been recommending to try and avoid it unless it's significantly higher item level than what you have. Is if you're given the choice between a completely random proc it really doesn't even help your burst much because it ramps over its duration instead of starting at a high value. So it doesn't really help your burst, and it's just RNG and equal to other weapons. So given the choice between RNG and not RNG, you're gonna pick not RNG, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right, let's move on to Toll. This is a pretty nice one from what I've seen. Is this boss
Oh,
or
yeah.
boss or trash focused?
Well, I think it can go either way.
Yeah.
Multiple bosses in there have multi-target aspects to them. There's really only one pure single-target fight. And I say that because by the time you get to the last boss, if you're properly abusing it, you should have multiple cannons dotted with corruptions. So you have like 4 or 5 corruptions out for ID cheesing. So it's supposed to be single target, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So grouping death is probably a good option, but Dark Souls probably just as fine.
Personally, I've found that Dark Soul does a little bit better in Mythic 0, but I'm interested to see how it plays out in Mythic Plus because the timings are going to change. But in Mythic 0, you pull pretty fucking fast and you can do some big AoE pulls and skip most of the trash. And doing that, Dark Soul lines up really well, but not so sure how it's going to play out in higher keys.
Right.
Honestly, it's like a dungeon that could very easily go either way, unlike most of them, where it's pretty clear cut because there is a pretty significant amount of time spent on bosses. But
Well, and other things to keep in mind is like you're immediately at +2. You're either a fortified or a tyrannical, so it also affects some things, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Has the Gahoon debuff, is that something that we even care about, or is that just sheep that mob and just don't touch it?
We can go over affixes as well after.
Yeah, we can do
dungeons
that. We
if
can
you
do
want,
that.
yeah.
We'll go that after. All right. So told the door, pretty just group reliant then, I guess, right? Just depending on
Yeah.
what you actually
Yeah.
need. So, okay. Waycrest? Thoughts? No? Nothing? Demon? Demo?
God, fuck this dungeon.
I think it's a great dungeon.
Just that
It
second
has an
boss.
arcway feel, honestly, just the way because your doors change, it seems.
Like, don't get me wrong. I love the style of the dungeon and like the pacing and everything, but that second boss just gives me so much cancer.
Second boss being
Yeah, the
the
trio.
tree.
I think he's
In my
second
mind,
boss
it's
no
the
matter
second.
what you do, right?
Yeah. Oh well, I guess yeah.
But it's
Why is that? Why is he such a?
I just the whole like they switch between each other and then your dots do nothing on that
Oh,
part.
you're talking about the Heartsbane.
You're talking
It's
about the witches.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's a pain. Like, is there something to do about that? Is that you actually
Well,
should
no,
just be Destro,
it
or
gets it gets way better on higher keys where they have a lot more health and they don't swap nearly as often, but like on low keys and Mythic 0, it's so bad playing Affliction on that fight because you just pop all your shit and then the boss has already gone immune to damage and it's
right? You almost
not
start your
fun.
ramp on this second one just so you can hit it when she's swapped or something. Is
Yeah.
what I almost did.
Well, once you get into higher keys, it's gonna work out that Affliction's really powerful because of the extra shards from Agony and the extra ID stacks from the other bosses keep ticking even when they're like it's a 99% aura, I think. They're not
Yeah,
immune. So
yeah.
it goes from like one of the least enjoyable fights in all of Mythic 0 for Affliction to really, really powerful, but
Is there anything to do about the massive amount of raid damage or group damage that comes out? Like, is there a specific one we want to be kicking?
on which fight?
Cooldown?
So the specific way
Sisters.
that fight works is whenever one of them is active, their bolt does I think double damage.
Okay.
So you really just want to be focusing on the one that's active. If you have off kicks, you can also get the other ones. Like a moon kit is pretty powerful for that. Same thing for Vengeance Demon Hunter. Those spells typically end up being the highest damage you take on that fight. So that's really all there is to it. It's just an interrupt rotation fight for the most part, and making sure you're moving during the I think it's Malady, the second one.
And making sure
Yeah.
you're close enough so that you can get cleaved down from the mind control.
That's
The other
that's
thing
one
that's
thing.
just enraging to deal with.
That's one thing I think we could have brought up on the other keys as well is when you want to be swapping between pets. I kind of forgot about that because at this point
Ooh,
it's just
good
like
point.
routine for me. Like I just do that naturally and I don't really think about it. But that's knowing when you should be using like Void Walker because you need AoE or Fell
Right.
Hunter because you need an interrupt is really important. And that's the Soulbound Goliath or whatever. No, what is it? The
Fell Hunter.
Heartsbane Triad. There it is in the dungeon journal. The trio of witches in there is really good for Fell Hunter to get that interrupt.
Right. Cool. Um, have we heard if
Oh,
the demo is still bugged on the tree, right?
I think I haven't heard anything about it being fixed.
Okay.
The last time I checked, Demo has some major pet issues on the tree boss in Waycrest Manor, where when you kite the boss into the fire, melee pets sometimes just like completely bug out and don't do anything for reasons
Are BM
we
hunters
think
dealing with
related.
that too?
I don't know. I know it affects Demo, and I don't really pay attention to other classes, but um, we think it's related to the little fire guys that spawn and walk at people, but
Yeah, there's a couple people saying the same thing happens in Shrine for something.
Shrine.
Saying I don't know. Not's doing not things.
Well, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay.
One other thing that I just remembered for Waycrest, along the lines of the cannons that you can dot in Tol de Gore, in Waycrest, you can dot Lord Waycrest or Lady Waycrest. while she's
Lady,
off in Africa doing nothing,
Oh
and
yeah.
your
And
dots do tick on her. Even
is it
though,
full damage or is it just
It's
micro
like
damage?
it's 1% damage,
Oh,
but
okay.
you know
yeah,
it's still
yeah, but
shards.
you get shards and you get inevitable demise stacks, which is really good to make
Right.
sure that you're dotting Lady Waycrest even when she's immune.
All right. Anything else? Ral the Glutinous. Nothing really exciting with him. Just burst him down.
Nope. The other
No.
fights are pretty straightforward.
The other fights are just basic, straightforward. Hit the boss, do a lot of damage.
Let's talk
Now I
about
think we didn't talk. We kind of skipped over it in Shrine because I forgot to talk about it. But both Shrine and Waycrest Manor are pretty much the two dungeons you're looking at for dungeon trinkets.
right.
You've got the Conch from Shrine, which is just a basic int trinket with a crit proc. It's not fantastic, but it's probably the best dungeon trinket outside of the one from Waycrest, which is the Balefire branch, I think is what it's called, which is a
Balefire
minute
branch.
30 on use int, which is perfect because it lines up with Dark Glare and just very good in general for Affliction.
Yeah,
Definitely want to be targeting that.
Balefire is super powerful for
Oh,
burst-based specs.
Yeah, because you can just line it up with every 3 minute cooldown, and it's
Yeah.
pretty good. It's a
Yeah.
lot of int on that on that use too.
It's really powerful if you're not taking damage, and even when you're taking damage, if you're a burst-based spec, it's like it really doesn't matter. Usually you don't take damage like in the first 20-30 seconds of the pull anyway. So
All right. Atal Dazar. I guess quickly loot. Anything to keep in mind here? And trinkets.
no.
Nothing. All right.
This is where an inevitable demise trait drops for Mythic Zeros, but we're talking about Mythic Plus. So.
Fair enough. The helm, the inevitable demise helm
Mhm.
drops in Mythic Zero Atal Dazar, but you can't Titan Forge it, so it feels bad.
Well, you will still be having 0 pieces probably for the first raid here, I would assume at least.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Especially
I mean,
with-
there are definitely going to be people in our guilds that finish the raid in full 340 as right.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes it good that you can trade it now, yeah? Like just
Oh, yeah.
get every single piece that is in a game, just that you have the chance to use whatever you want.
Okay. What order do you guys go on with this fight? Like, do you hop down first, go to the left, go to the right? What do you do?
I really like going to Rezan first, just getting a boss out of the way, getting your lust on cooldown. It's just good for farming. Then after that, like the general strat on beta was go to Rezan, go to the totems boss, figure what he's called, and you use like a shroud or invis pot to do that, so you don't have to deal with any of that trash, because that trash is some of the worst trash in the dungeon.
That
And then you
trash
just
is
go through
awful. That trash
Yeah,
is
it's
really
really
awful.
bad. And then you just go over to the through the middle to the other boss, and it's done. Atal'Dazar is easily the easiest dungeon for Mythic Plus that they've ever put in the game. It's a 39-minute timer for whatever reason. I mean, there's a reason whenever you go back and look at the BFA beta videos, every single time they're like world first 15, world first 16, world first 17. They're all Atal'Dazars, every single one of them.
I remember
Because
that
that dungeon
dungeon
is really
being
easy.
absurdly undertuned when I did it. I did like a 7 or an 8, and we did that in everyone was like 345 gear, and we did a 7 or an 8 in there. It's like, okay.
It's not that the dungeon's undertuned, it's just there's not enough going on in the dungeon. You can
Right.
skip too much, and you can do fast pulls. Just the
So-
timer needs to be reduced.
So, assuming that Blizzard realized that it was an issue in beta and has since fixed it going into live, and they reduced the time down to something more comparable to other keys, how do you think it fares versus other dungeons? Is
Especially
it still the
considering
easiest?
It depends. It's still one of the fastest dungeons to do. Like, it's kind of the Maw Souls right now, although it's not quite that fast.
Yeah.
It's still one of the fastest dungeons to do.
It seems like when I did it, you had a lot of trash there's like a shit ton of trash, but there's lots of ways to skip it, and so that's kind of why the timer's kind of weird. Maybe they need to reduce the trash, what trash gives you, I guess. I don't know, but it was. I mean, we hit 100% before we even killed the third boss, if I remember right. It was something ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, and there's also a nice skip. I think Shelly just posted a clip of it in your chat. They didn't like that people were invising from Rizan to the second boss, so they decided to plop this nice little pack right in front of the totem boss. But we just gateway by that through the wall because that works.
Yep.
Find that clip real quick. Oh my god. Skip the entire trash pull. Yeah, I noticed there's a lot of these types of gateway pulls where you can just. I know there was one on Motherload that I found that still hadn't been fixed, where you just kind of teleport through the walls and it's not a big deal.
It's crazy how much you can do with the gateway this expansion. Like I didn't expect that everything would go live like this. Like it's literally every single dungeon you can do something unreal.
Well, I remember when we found out all the new gateway skip stuff in Legion, they took that away in like 2 weeks, and then they just randomly brought it back.
The eye one, if you can remember, like left on the mountain, like everything got instant fixed. But now in BFA, there's everything still working.
So speaking of the Motherload, talk about the Motherload. Any good item pieces to grab?
Not really, or?
No, that was not that great.
No.
It's a good dungeon. I mean,
It has a crashing chaos trait for destruction.
all right, no one plays that spec.
Destruction. What's a destruction? Any cool anything to note as far as AoE? How is AoE single target specking?
I'd say creeping death 100% on that key personally. Like, there are a lot of wide trash packs. There aren't many trash packs that you can even pull less than 5 mobs at a time with. Like most of the trash packs in the dungeon are 5-ish mobs in size. There's a lot of AoE, and something that comes along with that is people don't quite like in most keys. You kind of want to play a little conservatively with your inevitable demise because you might not have time to get it back up before bosses, but like I found that in the Motherload, you can pretty much just pop it whenever it's near 100 and it'll probably be up for bosses because there's just so much AoE in that dungeon.
There's some of those caster mobs in there were just awful to deal with too.
Yeah.
You can't stun them or anything. I forget which ones they were exactly, but there was one of
The
them.
masterminds.
Yeah, those guys suck.
Yep. So the strategy we came up with for that dungeon on beta is get all of your trash done before the second boss, and then just death skip to the third and fourth boss.
Oh my god.
Because all of the trash after the second boss
Yeah.
is miserable. You just don't want to deal with it.
Talking about after going from the mines into the third boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awful.
As soon as you kill the rock boy, all of the trash is just awful for the rest of the dungeon, which is why I was thinking, like, creeping death, but maybe you don't play creeping death if you just skip all of the trash.
Do
I
you
mean, or inevitable demise.
on the on the first boss, do you hold off on popping cooldowns and everything until it gets the damage buff? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, just to
100%.
clarify that.
It's 150%. It's insanity how much
Right.
damage Affliction does during that.
The
Affliction
only
does
class
have
that can...
it does have like a lot of ramp up time compared to a lot of other classes though,
Right.
so I found it's better to make your group aware that you kind of need a turret for like 10 seconds to get your shit out
Yeah.
to do the damage, so you can't really be kicking bombs as Affliction very well if you want to maximize your burst window.
And I think that's kind of the biggest problem with Affliction right now. Which is, I mean, it's not really a problem. The only problem Affliction really has is you have this insane 3-minute cooldown that takes like 10 seconds to ramp to. And if that 10-second window gets messed up, it kind of sucks bad. So you'll do a little less damage, but really not that much less.
Yeah.
And if that's your only problem, you're sitting pretty right now.
Right. Cool. Do you do anything special on the second boss? Is that just like banish and CC as many of those ads and pop off the boss, or what's going on with that? Because every time I've done this on heroic or mythic, it just is kind of a clown fiesta of just kill the boss.
I think it just comes from not understanding how the boss works, essentially, right?
Yeah.
The way that boss works, and I mean, I'm sure most people know, but just to inform, if you let the ads melee you, they apply a stacking physical bleed, essentially.
Yeah.
So if you let one wail on you and you get 10 stacks, you're gonna die. It's just gonna happen. So essentially, what you do is you try to get them mostly stacked up on the boss, so you can AoE them down.
Yeah.
And once you do that, it's easier to stun them, and you kind of just kite in circles so they stay close to the boss, and you can AoE them down.
Okay. So you do just kill you do Mongo kill them, but you
Yeah.
just there's a little bit of method to it at least.
Yeah, just don't let them wail on you.
Right.
Slows are very, very good looking
Yep.
at you, frost mages.
Oh yeah, real quick, while you're on the topic of mages, if you ever have a mage play Arcana in your group, just don't play with them. You need to give them like negative reinforcement to that. The first time you hear an arcane mage say, "I need mana," just instantly pull. That has to stop. I don't care if it does like 10% more damage than frost. Slow is really important for Mythic Plus.
Cool.
My redstone.
Oh man. Okay. I think that the bot. Otherwise, this dungeon is pretty cut and dry. So let's talk about Underrot. Underrot. Any good gear? Anything to look for?
Yeah, the trinket from the first boss is insane, always.
Is that the single target dot one?
It's the
Yes.
fucking doll.
The voodoo doll.
Yeah.
It sims insane.
Only
I
slightly
mean,
behind Arcano 2.0.
Yeah.
It does some damage single target, but it's kind of poop outside of that.
I mean, I was trolling anyway.
Yeah, he was strong. That trinket's bad.
Yeah.
Don't use it.
They nerfed it
know.
really hard. It was decent in beta, and it's bad now. It's just oof.
That mount.
That one
though,
went right over my head. Sorry, boys.
There is a...
Look, I'm in my defense. I spend a lot of time reading the Affliction channel
Ooh.
on Discord, so
Why would you do that to yourself?
I mean, there's a reason I do nothing but incessantly troll on that channel. It's because it's no one pays attention. You can give people the correct answers any number of times, and you'll get another guy asking the same question 2 minutes later. I can't handle it. I just troll them.
All right, so AoE dungeon single target. What are you doing here?
That's definitely a single target dungeon. All of the all of the trash pulls in there are relatively small, except for maybe the ones in the second boss room. It's just a misery dungeon for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Any bosses to keep in mind? Something that you got to change up?
I'd say it's pretty much the most straightforward dungeon as far as Affliction goes. You pretty much just kill the bosses and keep your dots up on trash. There's nothing really interesting in the dungeon at all.
I would say that if there's any dungeon to not play Inevitable Demise in, it's this one.
Yeah.
Because there's not very many situations you're doing small trash pulls.
Right.
Which means you get less stacks. All of the bosses are single target for the most part. And the last boss, you can't even gain stacks from.
Yeah, the last boss, you technically don't deal any damage to him, and the trait requires corruption to deal damage to stack.
Mm-hmm.
So, just doesn't work at all. It's great.
So absorbs just don't generate anything.
Yep.
That's
Correct.
nice. Okay. Temple of Sethralis. This is a long dungeon, also.
Yeah, I didn't do that dungeon.
I mean,
You
it
didn't
is
do
a pretty
this?
good, it
To
is
be-
a pretty good weapon.
No,
at
nobody
least.
did that.
To be fair, it was bugged for like 2 months straight. The last boss would just kind of bug out and...
I think of like all of the dungeons, this is the dungeon that I'm least looking forward to doing on Mythic Plus, like ever. It's just most of the fights seem like they would give me complete and utter cancer on high keys.
Well, and
Like
then
all
you've
of the bosses just do fuck tons of damage. They all have awful mechanics.
yeah, like the snake. The snake's second or third boss? I forget exactly which
Second.
one. Yeah, the second boss where he just burrows at percent intervals, and you get your burst starting to roll, and he's already burrowed, and you're just like, okay,
That does get better at higher keys, but
right.
that first boss on high keys is just like, oh god, the lightning shield is. Ugh. You like basically can't even look at that boss in a high key on tyrannical.
One thing I'll say about AF in this dungeon that I found at least is there's a lot of points where your the Fell Hunter Dispel is actually incredibly handy on this because you've got the offensive Dispel now, and I've been abusing the ever living shit out of that. And this boss, there's like one other that they like shields or something as well, and it's so handy to have.
I think
Shades was saying something about the dungeon too. What were you saying?
Yeah. It's,
For me? Oh,
Yeah,
I
you were
just
saying
said
something.
the weapon there is pretty good, yeah. When we speak about loot.
oh
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
arguably the best that we can get, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it
Or one of
is.
the
Yeah,
best
it
at least.
definitely is.
It's the best weapon for
Yeah,
affliction.
there's a
hands
haste
down. It's best
mastery
in slot.
staff from the dungeon, very good.
Like that's the thing. The gear in the dungeon is actually really good. The chest is the inevitable demise. The shoulders are racking brilliance. The staff is best in slot. It's just that it's such a miserable dungeon to do on high keys that I'm not looking forward to doing it.
I've just got the Wowhead's got the gif of the orb boss, and not the actual boss, but I'm talking about the merry-go-round orbs that you have to dodge and you get sent back over and over again. That's great.
Well, here the problem with that dungeon, and the reason most people have an aversion to it is on beta it wasn't bugged, it was just incredibly overtuned. The first boss, the AoE, does a lot of damage, as I'm sure you guys have seen in Mythic 0.
Yep.
And when Tyrannical is a level 2 affix, that starts to do one-shot damage at like level 7 or 8, let alone 13, 14, which is what people were doing on beta. So it pretty much got to the point where on a week-out basis, as you progressed towards the end of the week, it would be like, okay, how many non-temple keys do we have left to do? Because nobody wants to run that key. It was just too overtuned. The first and third bosses do way too much damage. The fourth boss is a pain for healers and one of the longest fights in any of the instances in the game right now. So it's just not a good dungeon in general right now. It's interestingly designed, just not well implemented.
I want to note one thing before we move on here, and that's that you get 3 inevitable demise for this dungeon, and it's not even for like the purposes of it doing good damage, but just the fact that like every boss in this dungeon tries to murder you hilariously hard. And that healing actually comes in useful very often.
I was gonna say there's been times I think on this one in particular on M0 where I'd like get like only 20 stacks of the drain buff and I'd be like,
Yeah.
well, I'm almost gonna die, so we'll just heal ourselves now.
Like that third boss, you need a lot of healing.
Right.
But
All right. Did we hit everything? I think there's one more that we did.
King's Rest, last one.
Rest. Right. Talk to me about totems.
Gross.
You can hit them now.
Wait, can
Yeah,
you? With what, Shadow Bolt?
You can dot them now.
Oh
That
wait,
would
what?
work.
When did that change?
Apparently the second week.
Holy
Really,
crap.
they did actually change it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I just played Destruction in that after the first week. Well, that's
Yeah,
good.
I was very surprised. I was doing it this week with one of the priests in our guild, and I'm like, yeah, we were running I think double Warlock mage, and I'm talking to the mage. I'm like, yo, dude, you're gonna have to solo these totems, and priest is like, no, you can dot them, and I'm like, wait, what?
This is news.
Oh,
Okay, well,
no, this is great.
for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, the Council of Tribes, the third boss in King's Rest, has one of the 3 bosses, the wise guy. He summons totems, and is tradition with totems in PvE encounters. But that made it really hard to play Affliction in that fight because the totems are really high value targets to kill. But I guess they fixed it, so now you can play Affliction and not feel bad.
Good.
Yep.
Good. So single target AoE. What are we doing?
It's another single target instance. The trash pulls are very
Yeah.
small in this dungeon.
I think particularly you really want Dark Soul Misery because of the final boss and the way that it works in the execute on hierarchies.
Talk about that then.
Well, he has a lot of health because it's a 3-phase fight and he splits damage with the ad that he spawns. And at the end of the fight, after you kill his ads, he gets real mad and just starts shooting shit everywhere. And it's kind of RNG because there are a bunch of different patterns, and some of them are considerably easier than others. But in general, it feels like for that boss, you kind of want to have like all of your cooldowns and just murder him as fast as possible.
Right. Yeah,
To
that
me.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else, Sarah?
Not particularly. That dungeon's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just an annoying dungeon to deal with. A lot of the trash in there is pretty deadly. And it was one of the more overtuned dungeons for a long time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's gonna be that bad.
So let's talk about something briefly. So we talked a lot about Affliction. That there are two other specs, and are there ever cases where, I mean, they're not going to be optimal, but are there ever cases where they're going to be okay? Like any dungeons that you notice where you're like, yeah, you could pull Destro here if you're not pushing top talent.
I just feel like, especially on lower keys, when your group goes actually pretty crazy with big pulls, you could play Destruction on Demonology, yeah? Where you can like use that big Infernal with Bloodlust. Let's say Ataldazar, like on the left side, Priestess pull with all the trash, or like if you're different dungeons where you can like go really ham and actually show your strength with that spec. But I guess like as higher you go with the keys, then it just shows how much better Affliction is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I felt.
I think there is something to be said about destruction though, because like based on sims and everything that I've tested on beta and on live, Immolate is actually really powerful as a dot. Like it's not on the level of, you know, UA or whatever have you, but it does a lot of damage and it's a lot of the resource gen. So when things die really fast, even though maybe your Kata CDF does a lot of damage, you don't have a lot of the damage from Immolate that makes the spec really powerful in hierarchies too. But I think it has, in general, I feel like if they just like nerfed Affliction by 50% tomorrow or something, Destro would be like good enough in all of the keys to, you know, like you don't need to be carried playing Destruction, right? You can carry your own weight against a lot of other specs in the game.
You can get your 10 completed
You're
every week.
Yeah, you're
without
not gonna
any
be
issues.
like, you're not gonna be in a world first group with like a sub rogue and a frost mage anymore, like Affliction would be, but it's good enough to do all of the stuff in the game.
What about Demo?
I don't know if you guys have played Demo at all, but I've played it a bit, and I've talked to a lot of people who love playing Demo, and to me, it seems like it's extremely powerful in like some specific situations, and outside of those situations, it's not very good. Like unlike Destruction, I feel like Demo is kind of shoved into its niche right now, which is like big AoE. If you're doing big AoE, Demo just destroys everything, right?
Well, it needs to have some ramp up time too to
Yeah.
generate imps, but so like
Yeah.
actual burst AoE is not that great on it. It's really good
No,
at sustained AoE.
Like when you're doing a big pull in a Mythic Plus key, like say Priestess, the Priestess in a Taldazar, where you can just pull that entire like 7 mob pack and the 2 priests on the side. You drop Grimoire, Infernal, or Felguard. You drop Grimoire, Felguard, you summon out some imps, you pop your Tyrant, you get 2 Fell Guards going for a long period of time. You pop D strength and you build up like a 3 or 4 set implosion, and then at the end of like 30 or 40 seconds you're just doing like twice everybody else's damage. But up until that point you're not doing very much, right?
You're spending a lot of GCDs on cooldowns.
Yeah, Demo, to what I think about the spec is that it's like all planning based,
Right.
which makes it harder to utilize. If you know like how every pull in a dungeon is going to go and where you can pop your cooldowns as Demo to max efficiency, I think it's really good in any of the keys where there's a lot of AoE, and it's probably not going to do as well on the keys like King's Rest, where it's mostly boss focused. So like any of the keys that we were talking about where you might play Dark Soul Misery, Demo's not going to do very well on, because its single target isn't good compared to the other specs in Mythic Plus. But in a lot of the keys like Motherload, where there are big AoE pulls constantly, I think it's going to do really well.
Both specs, then you're gonna be able to do your 10s, and you're not terribly dipping your group. You're just not gonna be pushing your 15s and 20s in the first 3 to 4 weeks.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
I would also argue that Destro in general is pretty good in some
Yeah.
of the dungeons that Dark Soul Misery is good in. So, like for instance, Underrot is a pretty solid
Yeah.
Destro instance just by nature of the small pulls and Havoc being more effective on 4 targets versus like 8 target pulls.
I was gonna bring that up too.
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with like in a lot of other dungeons you want to be using on the trash pulls where you do big trash pulls, and that's Destro's thing. You pop Infernal, you do tons of AoE. But conversely, on the keys that are mostly like single target focused, they generally have smaller pulls, a few targets at a time, and Havoc is really powerful there even after the nerf.
Mhm.
Destro will keep up on those packs, and then you can save Infernal and Grimoire of Supremacy with like Crashing Chaos for bosses and just melt them. So it's I feel like Destro's probably one of the better specs in Mythic Plus, even if Affliction gets nerfed. But right now there's just not a good reason to play it over Affliction.
it's good. It's just not a rogue.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, do we have any other thoughts on Mythic Plus?
We're gonna go over affixes.
Let's go over affixes. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Cahoon.
Yeah, talk about Cahoon real quick.
So the new Mythic Dungeon mechanic for BFA or Legion 2.0, you can call it either one. The new mechanic is called Infested. Essentially what that means is any given week you're going to have a specific set of ads in the dungeon that are infested. Now what this means is they will do a certain amount of percentage healing to the mobs around them, and when they die they'll spawn 2 very small ads called Spawns of Cahoon, which will then try to infest other mobs and turn them into infested mobs, which is bad. So essentially the way dungeon pulls pretty much go is you look at the pull, you determine whether or not you just want to kill that first or if you want to CC it and kill everything else first. And when it dies, you need to make sure you can focus down and CC the ads effectively. That's really all there is to the new mechanic. Now, Affliction admittedly is pretty bad with dealing with this mechanic. Affliction's like major weakness is that it doesn't have very good burst. It doesn't have good target switching. Now the only real way we have of doing damage to those is through a decently stacked Inevitable Demise Drain Life. That's about it. I think your best bet is dealing with them as a Warlock in general is just to stun them for your group so they can do the damage to them. Yeah.
Volcanic really sucks for Destro.
Yeah, no, Volcanic's awful for Destro.
Destro's really good most of the time, but any time that you have Volcanic and you just have to move like constantly, particularly if you're like one of the only ranged in the group, and they just all go on you. It's miserable. It's
Right.
absolutely miserable.
And this is really just more to speaking as to how insane of a trait Inevitable Demise is. Like it gives Affliction so much just extra utility. It gives you burst, which you don't have, like target swapping burst, which you don't have. It gives you some of the most insane self-healing, like more self-healing than Drain Soul did in Legion. Like 1 tick of Drain Life heals you to full if you have high stacks. It's really stupid. But Explosive. Affliction didn't really have a great way of dealing with Explosive in Legion outside of Drain Souling them. If you're pulling it back of 6 mobs and you have corruptions on all of them, 10 stack Drain Lives are enough to kill an Explosive. You can be the Explosive killer as an Affliction Warlock with Inevitable Demise. That
awesome.
can be your job. That trait gives you so much to work with. It's actually nuts.
Tune in next week when we talk about it getting nerfed.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. It's just too good in general.
Maybe let's take a quick minute here. How do you guys think they should nerf it in a way that will keep it from just never being played ever?
Say drop the max stacks by like half, if not more.
Dropping the stacks will decrease its efficiency, which is probably good.
It needs to not deal like 40% of your damage on a pull. Like that's the first thing, and you just kind of mitigate that by just making sure you stack it to literally.
Yeah, I think before they buffed it by like 3 times going into live, you didn't want to use it until you had like 60 plus stacks of the buff for it to do like more damage than Shadow Bolt at 1 trait. But now it's something like 30 for a single stack. So even if they cut the stacks down to 50, you would lose some value from having to drain life more often, but it would still be worth using over Shadow Bolt at 50 stacks 100% of the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think that's the best way is to just cut the stacks down so you can't constantly have 100 stack going into a boss and then it just does 20% of your damage.
I could also see them giving it the souls treatment in raids where you can't get, souls would
please
go
no.
away. Well, I mean, souls would go away when you hit a boss in raiding.
Please, man, that would.
Oh, there's no way they're gonna let you start bosses with stacks.
Don't even
Hold
give
on.
them
Don't.
the idea.
Yeah.
Don't
I
even
was
give them the idea.
confused as to where you were going with
No,
that.
not
We're
like
not-
oh,
listen.
by the way, now more things give these stacks.
We're not gonna
No,
be
not
dropping
that.
10 turnip punching bags in a raid and getting 100 stacks before every single pull. It's not gonna happen until you get to kill pulls. Like that's kill me.
Until you get to kill pulls. I
Kill
like
me.
that one.
No.
It might happen at kill pulls though. I mean, but it just resets on pull anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, it should. It doesn't right now.
Yeah, it doesn't
wait,
right
what?
now. No,
What?
it doesn't,
Doesn't.
right now.
What? I didn't know
That's
this.
what I'm
mean,
talking about. Is number
have you-
one
have
that
you
needs to be a
tried-
thing.
Try it right now. Go to get your stacks set up on a target dummy in the Great Seal and go zone into a Tel Desire. You have the stacks for 20 seconds. They don't go away.
Rip.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is you
Rip.
want to make sure that that's not a thing.
That sounds like a major bug that should be fixed regardless of tuning that trait.
Right.
Not a bug.
Not a bug.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about with Mythic Plus?
Yeah, it just
No,
just
I
like-
think we covered everything.
generally Affliction's gonna do the best overall, no matter what. Destro and Demo are they're good enough to do your 10. Destro's a lot better than Demo is, but Demo can hold its own weight in a lot of keys.
All right. So let's go to a section where Deep Shades can actually comment. Let's talk about some raids. We'll start at the top. First of all, what's your general thoughts about this tier? Better, I hope, than Emerald Nightmare.
Yeah, I mean better than Emerald Nightmare. I hope at least to
The
play 3-4
the bar
days.
is very low there. So
Yeah. Even though I have to say, the bosses didn't impress me at least much on the beta. I don't know how Xeronix felt when he was testing with Limit, but for me, like personally, except like Zul, which was basically my favorite boss, and Gahun, there wasn't like much to look forward to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of the bosses are pretty straightforward and only have like one major mechanic that seems pretty easy to deal with. Zul
Yeah.
was the only one that stood out as like, oh, this will require some thought to actually pull it off.
I mean, I really liked on Zul this. I don't know if we will go later specifically on every boss, but I just like on Zul this mechanic that you can't just kill everything. Yeah, you have like this debuff with the 12 seconds time frame. I don't know exactly what time frame it was, but only one ad at a time is like killable basically, which was really interesting, or two at a time.
To me, I mean, I didn't do a lot of raid testing, but this sounds like pretty much exactly Emerald Nightmare. Like maybe there are two bosses that are
No.
decent instead of one, but like that kind of just sounds like scenarios to me.
Well,
It-
it basically is kinda in a way. Yeah.
Like just figure out how you handle the ads, and it's the only hard boss in the dungeon.
The
I don't
thing
know.
is, like, the second last boss, they tested like how many times? 5 times, I think, betwixt and Reveler, and like every time it was either way too easy and we like trolled people with fearing them out of the mind control and whatever,
Oh my
or like
god.
we got completely stomped by the boss like at 80% without like going too much into our raid testing. But I don't know, it's like I have no idea how hard this boss will
That's
be
fair enough.
because like just on the tech, like just on the boss abilities itself, it doesn't read like it will be a hard boss. So like for me, it's definitely like, how hard will be Zul and which tactic will you play there? Because I think I could see like a few cheesy tactics on that boss, and like how hard obviously will be Gahun. But like the first five bosses at least, basically from Tarlok till Vectis, I mean these bosses seem to like fall in the first like 4 or 5 hours. I don't see any of them being like really hard unless they overtune one of them so that you actually will have problems with the enrage itself.
Hmm.
So
Well,
yeah, it does look a bit like Emerald Nightmare.
I think in general you can expect this to be an easy intro to the expansion with maybe a couple hard bosses. It's like Ian.
Well, that's been
Good.
their theme since Mop.
Yeah.
Is the first raid is kind of just
High
like a,
Mall.
just
I
kind of
just
like a.
high mall is fine though in my opinion. Like if I get
Oh
to
yeah.
raid at least 3 to 4 days, like basically if whoever
Yeah.
gets the world first kills it like Friday night or like Saturday night, I think that is decent for a first raid. I mean, it is the entry content. People like that, especially subscribe only for like the new expansions, always should get to see the content, and I think that is a fine race. But I just don't want to wake up
You don't
and
want to wake up
basically,
Thursday
oh,
morning and find out, oh, the Russians killed it again.
yeah, or like Xeronix writes then, yeah, we are done, boys. Because I mean, let's be real. Even if Europeans would kill the raid faster, everyone would still say like the Americans got the world first.
Yep.
Like no one
Sure.
cares about like that time difference or
Sure.
whatever. And that's why. And yeah, I mean that Xavius was a big disappointment with. Okay, Russians got a really good tactic on scenarios, and then thought like, yeah, let's stay awake. Oh, we got to phase 3. Oh, we killed him. No extra phase. Like that was a huge bummer.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it goes to at least Friday, I'm more than happy. Like that is okay for me.
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
that. Another like I'm always I think you said it
I
perfectly.
I don't know. I kind of long for the days where the first raid tier wasn't just intentionally undertuned, and like maybe the boss actually survived a week. Like one boss like survives a week to the next reset, and then everybody kills it,
Well,
right?
Heimal
And
almost did, if I remember right.
Nah, Heimer was Friday for
Oh,
Paragon
Heimal was
and
Friday?
Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah, Friday for Paragon. I mean, it was a bit weird anyway since they killed the end boss before Butcher. But I
That
mean,
was
yeah,
awkward.
Method killed on Saturday. I mean, I agree with you, Gado. I would rather have like even the first content being 1.5 to 2 weeks. Like that would be definitely like my dream as well because I play for progression rating. But if Blizzard at least managed to give me content for 3 4 days, then it at least became worth like doing all these world quests and whatever. Like,
mm,
I mean, that would be okay for me.
All right.
As long as you get a weapon drop, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking forward to the heroic week. Like personal loot, I don't know.
60.
It's like I guess average player gets like 2 to 3 items on these. What is it? 9 bosses? 7 bosses? I don't
Eight
know, but like
bosses.
8 bosses. I would say the average would be 2 to 3 yeah, items. Then you need to hope it's the proper items. Hopefully no duplicates. Like I don't know. In the end, you will basically just go with your Mythic Plus gear into the raid and hope that your
That's kind of what I was assuming. Is you guys are gonna just kind of clear your heroic, and then you're just gonna sit in Mythic
Yep.
Plus for 50
And
hours.
that should be good though, in my opinion, because like then
Yeah.
Blizzard at least knows how to tune it, or like that should
Right.
be like, okay, these guys will have this item level. I guess you can be a bit more or less lucky with the weekly
Right.
chest. Having 3 items, I think, was the max
Yeah,
as a chance.
That's what I'm looking forward to less than anything. Weekly chest opening Tuesday morning of Mythic Week. I'm gonna get a 385 crit verse ring,
Yeah.
and the other warlocks in my guild are gonna get a 385 weapon and 2 Azurite pieces, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that
be
is the
like,
problem in Method
hello.
as well. We have people like Jinji, Xervo, they just now they will loot, and you see already the sit you yourself on the bench. Yeah, voice times 350 guilds. Go on
I'm just
without
gonna go
me.
stream Mythic Plus. You guys have fun in the raid. See ya.
Yeah. Like it's actually crazy like how much RNG is involved with like looting.
Well, like,
And, I mean,
Okay.
did you guys level a bunch of locks then? Like, what are you?
No,
no.
that'd be
I
insanity.
think that was like the initial response of everyone when we heard like
you're
that
like-
Master gone.
You're not gonna have enough time anyway
Right.
because you're gonna be in Mythic Plus on your main like the
Yep.
entire fucking week just grinding to get gear.
Right.
But that was the idea initially, like when we heard that Master Loot gets
Yeah.
removed. Yeah, why don't we level just all our main classes 3 times? But then in the end, yeah, it's still useless anyway because of the plus grind. Unless you do like the heroics the first day, clear them all, and then you see, okay, this was my most lucky character. Hopefully he will be equally lucky in plus.
And I know there are some people that are doing like that thing with like 2 characters. Fortunately, no one's insane enough to do it with like 4 or 5 characters. That was
Well, there's just not enough time
Yeah.
right now. Like, there's a lot of grinding to do. So, okay. Well, this was a nice little derailment. I enjoyed that conversation. Let's talk about Talik the Corrupted. So, kind of what I want to do is, number one, any main pieces that you want to pray to the coined gods to. And number two is, obviously, AF is good. Is Destro or Demo going to be kind of viable? That's a big no from Zyro and on like everything or this boss.
There's no reason to play other specs in the raid. Maybe you could make a case for Destro for some cleave if you need it, but
Just always AF.
Affliction is just way too strong right now.
I mean,
think
it's
you,
basically
like-
single.
You maybe make an argument for Destro on Vectus, but outside of that, it seems like
I
it's
don't know.
just a
I
bunch
liked it for Zul, to be honest. With the mechanic that you actually can't kill like every single ad. I don't know, and like you needed to kill like the ads in the specific time window on Mythic. But I mean that really depends what else class-wise you have, obviously in the raid, and how hard it will be to kill them in this kind of time period. But yeah, Vectus definitely looks like the boss. That would be the closest for Destruction Warlocks because Havoc just perfectly lines up with the ad that is spawning.
Mm-hmm.
So like just like a quick math segment here. Destro and Affliction actually do pretty comparable damage on sustained 2 targets, which is hilarious and a massive issue. That's because Destruction's literally 15% behind Affliction right now, single target. You just don't do damage as Destro single target outside of like your 3-minute burst, which I will admit, Destro does a lot of 3-minute burst, not nearly as much as AF, but more than most other specs in the game. But outside of the opener, you just don't really do boss damage at all, ever. And that's like a major issue for the spec's viability. And on top of that, Affliction actually has better single target priority damage for ads right now than Destro does.
That ad needs to die. Let me just drain life it for 150k damage.
Yeah, but like even outside of that, you just like throw Haunt, 3 UAs and a Death Bolt, and you've done the damage of like fucking 4 Chaos Bolts, and it's like cool. I don't know why I'm playing Destro. Affliction's good. let's just say Affliction's good, and start talking about specific bosses.
All right. So we'll do that. Let's talk about Talik the Corrupted. First off, any gear to look at? Trinkets,
I mean,
I
weapons,
believe it has a
weapon-
wand, right?
I
It
mean,
has a wand.
you're happy about any weapon upgrade you can get, or
Yeah.
just
obviously.
item
All-
level wise?
None of the weapons in the raid have haste mastery, so ideally you get a 385 haste mastery from Mythic Plus or something. You get super lucky, but if you don't, they're all whatever. They're pretty good.
The
Yep.
trinket is a damage
I think,
effect. Is that pretty garbage?
There's the one staff off Feta Devour has crit verse, and that's kind of feels bad, but the other ones are all right.
Do we have any properly modeled sims for that trinket? I know the raid trinkets are
For
lagging behind pretty
Talok's
bad
trinket?
in sims.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it works. It just does the damage when it procs.
It just doesn't
but
do that much damage.
It doesn't do that much damage, and
It's
the other
split damage too.
the
so
other
it's-
yeah that's the other issue with any damage proc trinket in this expansion is they're either pure single target or they split damage, which means that compared to like any trinket with like a stat proc is just bad for cleave and AoE. It's
I
just
don't get-
straight up awful.
I don't get Blizzard anyway. That's like a little bit off topic, but we were speaking about it in Method, like even already in Legion. Like, what is so hard to do? Just give me fucking like intellect with a mastery proc, or like crit with an int proc. Why do I always need to like throw bananas on the ground? I don't know, kick like punching back. Like, why is there always just something shooting out of my character's ass instead of me just getting a proc and I play around it with like Chaos Balls, with my CDs, with horns? I don't know. Like,
Dude,
why do I
look.
always need this kind of
Take me
trinket?
Look,
back to Throne of
summoning
Thunder.
a spooky tentacle that does nothing and probably doesn't ever target swap is just
Yeah, like,
it's so much
just
more
give
fun.
me like the MOP Darkmoon card, int with int proc, and I'm fucking happy. Like, legit. It's so crazy.
So we can knock out right off the front that there's only one good trinket out of this raid, and it's
Alright.
the twitching tentacle. The twitching tentacle's really powerful. The numbers on it look like it's pretty good. So it should that's like something you should be aiming to coin is the twitching tentacle.
I was lucky enough to have one of those on beta. I was the envy of everyone on beta. I had the icicle and the twitching tentacle, so I just had two
Ooh.
And the
improv trinkets.
icicle.
Everyone hated
Oh
me.
my god.
So the
So-
tentacle,
ahead.
in my extensive use of it, it's an improv trinket that generally has around 20% uptime, so 15 to 20% uptime, which is pretty normal, right? That's
Right.
decent. The icicle has about 40% uptime for God knows what reason, but that thing
Yeah.
is overtuned, and I'm
Yeah,
glad
they
nerfed
nerfed it, and now they made it back to the normal again, yeah?
I
In-game,
th-
at least.
Yeah, I think what happened there is it's just there's some inconsistency across builds, and that nerf went on too early.
Yeah.
Could
They,
be,
they're-
yeah.
I think that's going to be
Or
right
it got
now.
overridden.
What happened, what we're pretty sure happened, is that the hotfix that they applied to nerf that and lay shocks involved some bugs that they didn't want to go, like it wasn't ready to go live when it went live, and it's probably going to get nerfed later. Because it
Okay.
introduced they intended to nerf lay shocks grand compilation, which is a BOE world drop trinket, just like from random mobs, right? It currently gives 21 secondary stats, and the intended nerf was 18, but the crit buff gave 11 instead of 18, and it didn't scale properly with item level, and there were just a whole bunch of bugs. So it's likely that Drustruned, Icicle, and Lay Shocks are going to again later at some point after they fix the bugs.
Wait, when does the game come out?
Does the game
Releases in
come
1
out?
month.
Well,
Okay.
Legion just finally exited beta, so
Okay, so
we got about a year and a half before we're good.
Yeah, just
twitching's
give-
good.
Twitching
Let's
is
look
Let's
into
talk.
excellent.
Let's
World
talk
Class
about
trinket.
the boss.
Talk about
So-
bosses. Let's talk about Talok
Okay.
the
All right.
Corrupted.
Love
Talok the
segues.
Corrupted. What was your opinion on this?
Your first boss in the first raid of a new expansion. I mean, that
Yes.
boss can't do
Yes.
anything. I mean, it's for you as a caster, it's basically just most of the time stand still and have a pure single target fight
Beautiful.
till like the elevator starts to go down, where you have to kill a few blobs, which will be not like the job of a Warlock, I would say at least. I don't know if Xyros thought the same, but it's not that we can do too much there, in my opinion, at least when we drive down with the elevator. And in last phase, it's also the majority single target.
I would say that there are a couple like secondary things in this fight. Like if your group has awful ad damage, you could maybe make a case for playing Destro, because there is
Right.
pretty good target cleave there. And likewise, if you're playing Inevitable Demise, you can just soak the ads in the last phase and just
Oh,
drain
yeah.
through them because you don't give a fuck. That'd be pretty funny. There's just some things Warlocks can do in these fights with Inevitable Demise that your utility is ridiculous.
Cool. All right.
First boss, first raid, probably gonna be a joke.
It should probably
Easy
fall
clap.
over. It should get. I mean, I'm not going to say it should get one shot because there have been some bosses that bosses that are actually annoying, but it should get. It should probably be, first 20 minutes.
Okay. Let's talk about Mother. How do you handle bouncing between walls or whatever it is that you're doing with this?
So I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't done extensive testing on this boss, but the one thing that stood out to me as a Warlock is you can Shadow Fury through the wall. So if you need an AoE stun through the wall, you can do that. That's like your main utility on this fight, pretty much.
Does that probably mean you can gateway through the wall? I don't know if that's useful or not, but
You can. I mean, you can. You'll still spawn ads though.
right. Okay. Oh, you meant like through the wall that you walk through. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they need
I-
extra help on sending ads,
Right.
you can do that.
It's
I
anything-
mean, I guess there will be just like two tactics there. Either you have always a bigger group going all together, or like the guilds that will just send like one person, one person, one person, one person. I mean, I don't know right now already what is better. I mean, I guess going in like as a group through it is the best, but even there, I would say again, like Warlock is the guy that just kind of sticks on a boss, unless like Saronic said already on the first boss, you really have bad ad damage and could play then Destruction, for example, and Cataclysm these then. But I just think it will be again one of these bosses where we just concentrate on pure boss damage. Personally,
I agree.
So one thing to note about that we didn't talk about for Telic either is that in Rage you have like two primary talent choices as Affliction, and that's choosing between Absolute Corruption and Siphon Life, and then Creeping Death and Dark Soul Misery. So what? Let's talk about Mother first, and then we'll go back to Talok. Which of those talent setups do you think is going to work out the best on Mother?
pure single, I think. I mean, the ads are dying too fast for AC in my opinion, and creeping death shouldn't be like really helping on the ads either.
So focus the boss, play Siphon Life, Dark Soul Misery, top your raids, boss damage, feel good.
Yeah, at least the last time when we tested it, the ads had like no HP and just died to the few melees that are over on the other side, just cleaving them.
Cool. So like Talok then. How do you guys feel about talents on Talok?
It's the same thing, I think. I think it's just a pure single target fight where you run Siphon, Dark Soul.
So okay, but here's something. When the situation happens, like you mentioned earlier, where you might play Destro because your raid group has really bad ad damage for whatever reason, maybe you just do really low raid numbers and your comp's just unfortunately bad for ads. Would you recommend changing the talents from the single target then to like Creeping Death AC?
You could make a case for that, for sure. You do more damage to the ads in the elevator phase, but I think it'd just be better to just do a pure swap to Destro.
At that point, just if your group's having issues with ads, just go Destro instead of.
Yeah, I mean
staying
that
back.
must be really like a horrible group, yeah, or like
Well, it
lineup.
happens. It happens.
Yeah, or like a not horrible group, but perhaps like horrible lineup class-wise. That this case really happens that you as a Warlock decide to okay, I will do the ads now. I think that is like such a rare scenario that like close to no one will ever experience. So most of the time you will just play on the first two bosses, the pure single target lineup, and be the hero if you don't get nerfed.
Right. Gato may have died. I'm not sure. We'll be back eventually. We'll go ahead and move on to Zekvavaz, Herald of Enzoth. What do you think? Oh, sorry, we skipped one. Feated Devourer. Let's start with him first.
I hated him.
I don't. Yeah, that
I
boss
hate him
is.
so much.
It's
Why?
not a good boss.
Oh,
It's a positioning nightmare, and I mean, it's not hard. It's just annoying.
yeah. I mean, a lot of movement is required at times, which makes Affliction a bit better than everything else anyway, in my opinion. Just redotting while movement. You have every here and then, like, what was it? It was X-Ox, Xyro, that you had to kill on the sides.
Um.
Like, he spawned two of these big eggs that you just had to kill fast
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Which I don't think live long enough that creeping death and AC would be worth.
No, I don't think so either.
So it's again one of these, okay, you just do pure single target on a boss. You obviously will dot the X and will use like a death bolt on them. But overall, it's again one of these fights. Yeah, you are just a hero with your single target damage. I mean, demonic circle usage is important there. Arguably, like, it's really useful there for the knockbacks, in my opinion, and to not spread the disease. But outside of that, not much to do. So basically, just min-max your movement, and you will be doing great on that boss fight.
Yeah, gateways are also incredibly useful in that fight for just getting people to the ads as well.
And then obviously, I mean, you have an Azurite piece there. You have a weapon on that boss. So like, it's the first boss kind of where, I mean, on the Mother as well, you have an offhand already on the Mother. So basically, first three bosses, even though they're that easy, they have already really good loot. I mean, even though I think Gado said it's only crit versus stuff, it will be still an upgrade probably for many
Yeah.
people over their M plus loot.
A lot of intel on
For
stabs,
sure.
so
Weapon item level is paramount always now. For the foreseeable future, you're always just going to be going with your highest weapon pretty much every time. So yeah. You got a wand and a staff and an offhand on bosses.
It's also the first item that has the Archive of the Titans trait. And I don't know if you guys simmed it already or like also found out about like the enables reorigination array with an Uldir. How that exactly works. Did you do that,
It's-
Gado?
I think it's a slow nerf to the
Wowhead had
instance.
a really good argue about this. If somebody could find the link, maybe in chat.
It's an
but
increase in secondary
yeah.
or main stats, right? That's how it works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it gets
it's-
more powerful as more guilds kill the
yeah.
boss, basically.
Oh, it was like this. Okay.
It's-
Yeah, I didn't know that. My bad then.
It's a stacking nerf to the
Yeah.
raid, and it's going to be intended that you're going to use at least one raid piece. It's like if it is not optimal for you to use a raid piece right now, the trait will be buffed so that you do. That's like the intent, is that everyone's going to have at least
Oh.
one of those equipped.
Right.
So we thought the way that worked in guild was that it was as you killed more bosses, you got buffed, but it's as other guilds kill the bosses.
My understanding
I'm
was
not
it could be what you're talking about, but what I understood was it was a gradual nerf to the raid itself. And that's how they're gonna soft nerf everything. Like all the end raids have had that since WoD, where you had some sort of item that would get more powerful, and that's just how you nerfed the instance.
So you're telling me in the first week, if I get that, I won't use it because
Maybe.
it's just too weak.
Maybe, I don't know. Like you'll probably have like one. It'll be enabled, I guess, but I don't know exactly. That's what I remember reading at least. So some clarification on that is probably something we should.
I mean, the second the raid will come out, we'll have concrete information on what like the base buff is and stuff like that. So
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay, so Feated Devourer kind of blows. You mentioned Deathbolt. You're holding that to help with the egg if you need to help with that, or just kind of go on
I really
cooldown?
need to hold on it, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Was also pretty easy on the beta. Like it's more like about just not spreading the disease and, like I said, like using your gateway, your circle. Like that is arguably the most important thing, because it kind of has a knockback like in Siege of Orgrimmar Juggernaut, if people can remember that fight.
Mhm.
You just get kicked so far, depending obviously where you face. You could also just face to a wall, but or with your back to a wall. That would also minimize obviously the way you fly. But yeah, that is just something really to watch out for, and go full
Okay,
single target.
so I found the article and I read through it again, and Wowhead thinks that it works like sort of a weekly quest kind of thing for the player, where every time that you kill like a powerful enemy, the next week you get a new quest to kill another powerful enemy or something along those lines, right? So every week you kill a boss and it stacks up again. So it's personally progressive, I'm pretty sure.
So it is,
But
but it's a personal nerf to the instance, basically. Is what
yeah,
it.
but the
Okay.
intent any way that it's set up is for it to progressively nerf the instance, but it based on data mining, it seems to be that every week you'll kill a boss and it'll gain power progressively every time that happens for some number of weeks that we don't know yet. So even if it's not good up front, it will eventually be very good to have. So
All right. Let's talk about Zekvaz.
Yeah, also affliction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have in Mythic at least a lot of adds up at the same time. That's like the first time where I arguably see Creeping Death and Absolute Corruption being good, depending how fast you can kill them. I mean, your goal is to kill them pretty fast, so I guess it would lose value speccing into it. But it's like perhaps for the first kills, it becomes worth to just push a bit extra damage on them. But yeah, overall it was like a fight where you have like a little dance. Like the boss has like 3 rings, and like one of the rings is always the safe spot basically. So it's like with a lot of movement involved. Then you drop like some clouds that you can't touch afterwards again. Basically like Yoxaron in the very first phase, the clouds, if you run into them you spawn an ad, which should never happen. So like a lot of movement involved at times, and yeah, you have 2 or 3 times like ad phases where you have like 3 bigger Nerub queens and like a lot of small Kuchongs. I don't know which talent Xyro would use, but I could see perhaps Creeping Death and Absolute Corruption being somewhat useful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you're stuck to playing Affliction, you can probably make a case for Creeping Death and Absolute Corruption. I think all three of these middle fights, like Fetid, Zekvaz, and Vectis, you could make a case for playing Destro on. Destro definitely would be good at killing all of the ads when they come out. You Cataclysm the small guys, and then you Havoc the big ones. But I think Affliction is still going to be the strongest spec in general on this fight.
All right. Easy enough. Vectis.
Yeah, I mean that was the one boss Vegado already said. Destruction could be really good. Like he spawns an ad that should die as soon as possible. I think it was like perfectly lining up with Havoc. Every 30 or 35 seconds was
yeah,
the ad coming.
Yep.
And I mean, like on paper, it basically sounds perfect for an destruction. But it like have to see how much HP it really has when it comes live, and if you really need to go to destruction. Because I mean, otherwise you could still be like the single target king and just burn the boss to make like enrage easier if there is one. But that's basically it. Like the boss has like this one mechanic where he spawns the ad and he has one transition where he's not attackable, and you have like to soak some circles on the ground during that transition phase. So like there's really not much to the boss. Both specs are viable, at least Affliction and Destruction. I don't see Demo being played there though.
yeah.
Yep.
I think this is like the fight in the tier where Destro has a serious chance of competing with Affliction, like in raw numbers, not just for like you need to kill these ads so you're gonna play Destro maybe. I think on Vectis, based on the sims that we've done for 2 targets, Destruction seems to keep up with Affliction on 2 targets, just in raw numbers. And Affliction also does less on a fight like Vectis because you have to do some amount of ramp on the ad, however much that works out to be. But
Right.
so I think we'll find that for like Mythic Vectis, Destruction will probably do about the same as Affliction.
Zyra, any thoughts?
I agree with everything that's been said.
All right. Zol?
I
You
mean,
guys said you actually enjoyed this fight?
yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It has like a lot of different ads, like little crocs that basically just have to be nuked. Then you have like a few blood hexers, I think, and like some blood warriors. I don't know the exact names, but like some of them are CCable, or like it's even worth to CC them. Some of them like you need to kill pretty fast. I mean, at least in heroic, I guess affliction will be pretty good because you can dot everything and it won't matter. And Mythic, like I said, there's like some debuff. Let me check if I can find it quick. Which one was it? Decaying Flesh, I think. Yeah, exactly. Like where you basically kill always one ad, then the debuff jumps over to another ad, and like always the ad only with the debuff you can kill. So like if you play Affliction, if you dot targets, you really have to make sure that the targets don't just randomly die.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that would make problems for the raid. I guess you as the Affliction itself aren't really killing like the targets by yourself, but I mean some classes obviously
Yeah.
have also some passive cleave and some other stuff that is probably like flying onto the ads. So there you have to really check it out. But overall, if you can min-max Affliction, I think I saw it like in the Encore raid testing, you can do so crazy damage as Affliction on the boss itself. Like, you're arguably one of the best single target classes on that one. Yeah, and obviously Inevitable Demise will be also insanely powerful if you can dot as much as you want. Because I mean,
I
then there's
heard
no way that you die.
Yeah.
I heard lots of corruptions is what I heard from that.
Yeah.
It is.
All of the corruptions.
Here's the thing about Affliction right now. Even if Affliction gets a 15% across the board nerf, Affliction is still going to be one of the best specs in the game on the last 3 fights in this instance, hands down. It's just this is Affliction's dream. This fight.
Don't say that, man, please.
It doesn't matter.
Well-
That's the thing. It doesn't
Well,
matter.
okay, but is that solely because of inevitable? Like if they nerf
Inevitable
ID
Demise makes
and
it
nerf
better.
Affliction.
Inevitable Demise makes it better. Actually, there's a big problem with Inevitable Demise in this fight. You will probably go on this fight playing
Yeah.
Inevitable Demise.
Yeah.
You just will. Drain Life takes a lot of mana, and you don't
Drain
see this in
Life-
Mythic Plus.
For people who don't know, Drain Life costs significantly more mana than Shadow Bolt. It's 50% more and twice as often. So it costs way more mana, and the mana regen of Affliction is balanced around Shadow Bolt.
Yeah.
So when you use Drain Life for prolonged periods of time, which some people will probably have experienced abusing dummies while world questing, you just run out of mana a lot.
Well, then you want second pot, you will just use the mana potion.
Oh my god. We've come full circle from TBC.
But if there's anything that I have learned from the history of Warlock, looking at you, Rain of Fire, is that even if you run out of mana, it doesn't matter because you're still doing more DPS.
Yep.
That's actually true, yeah. But yeah, I agree with Xyro that I don't know how much really on Mythrax, but like for Gahoon and for Zul, I don't know, Affliction will be a really, really good spec, for sure. Like, especially Zul, if you can play how you want it and have the proper gear for it. Like, you as a Warlock will be one of the key roles to defeat the boss, at least in the damage aspect.
Yep.
And
And
it's a
even-
really interesting boss, yeah.
Yeah, even if Inevitable Demise gets nerfed, Wrecking Brilliance is still nuts on this
Insane.
fight.
That's true.
So
True.
it doesn't they'd have to nerf so much and nerf it by so much of a significant amount that it's just not going to happen. I don't think.
But
It
that's
could.
one of the fights. Oh, sorry for interrupting. I mean, that's one of the fights like where it's actually fun to play, like Affliction. That's why you started playing it, or like you have actually a fight where you can multi-dot, where you can abuse like your class to the fullest. Like,
Yep.
Yeah. So on that note, I wanted to ask a question. On those fights where you think you can justify destruction in the middle, is that because destruction is very powerful relative to other classes' specializations, or is it because affliction is just bad compared to them? Like mechanically on those fights. Is it because affliction is just really, really bad at handling ad, so you have to play destruction maybe? Or is it that destruction will actually compete with other
it
classes?
was for me more like because it's better to play than Affliction. Because like especially like Zek was, like Xaro said, yeah, when like all the little ads spawn and you have like also the 2 or 3 big ones up, it's just nice. You pump like a Cataclysm in there, you can Havoc like one of the ads and kill the second big one. While with Affliction, you would arguably need to dot like the big ones first. On the small ones, you arguably won't do anything anymore because they would be dead already. So it's just because you as the Affliction won't be as useful on these targets.
It's about getting damage out in 3 to 5 seconds rather than 10 to 15.
Yeah.
You know,
That
a lot of the times in these progression fights, what you're doing is you're just trying to deal with the mechanics of the fight as they come at you. And if something makes it easier to deal with the mechanics, you do it. And then later on, if you realize you can't deal with the enrage doing that, then you make changes. So just playing a spec in order to deal with the mechanics of the fight might help your guild.
That's why I said like all the time, either you can just go Affliction and hope that like you have good enough of a lineup and the content is tuned that you basically can allow yourself to play full single target, or like Destruction will be a viable option here and there just to make it for yourself easier and also just for the raid better to play. But yeah, I wouldn't say like that Destruction would be then one of the bottom specs and would be like super good. It would be just easier to maneuver than Affliction would be.
All right, let's talk Mithrax. What are you guys doing on Mithrax?
I'm playing Affliction. I'm putting Corruption on every single tiny tentacle that spawns. And I'm draining a lot.
God.
I mean, that was just way too fucked on the beta. I think
Yeah.
we skipped the very last raid testing that they did on him after we tested him already 5 times, like I said.
That's
I mean,
promising.
it was like, it was majority of the time like single target, except like the transition, which makes Affliction obviously really good. A bit here and there movement involved if you get the debuff that you have to run out. But yeah, I mean, it definitely looks like an Affliction boss. Every here and then you have to get people out of the mind control, but that is not really your Warlock, like the Warlock's job. I don't think you can really do it good as a Warlock, so yeah.
Yeah, you can't really do anything as Warlock anymore.
There's this issue where Chaos Bolt still has like half the projectile speed of any other projectile in the game.
And?
But it's a big bolt,
You
yeah.
like that. My point is that even when you get off the Chaos Bolt on fights where you have to break MCs, a lot of the time it doesn't hit before the MC breaks.
That's not how the MCs work on this fight.
Oh,
You need to knock them out, like
Yeah.
out of the orb. It's like basically an orb. Around the orb is like the little circle, like the radius, and you need to knock them out. So basically, I don't know, Ring of Peace, Grip, like all these kind of abilities. And you as a Warlock can't really do anything.
Yeah, we used to have one of those, but they just decided to, take it out of the game for some reason.
Rip
Does
suck
Mortar
this.
Coil work?
I don't think movement, like fears or horrors, work. I don't remember trying it,
Nah,
though. It could
I'm
work.
pretty sure they were staying on the spot and just getting
They're
like the
just
full
staying on the
duration
spot.
of fear or something.
Yeah,
At
that's
least
what I
that was how
thought.
the earlier boss testings was. Because when it was so easy, we just trolled the people and feared them for 15 seconds.
We got a mention to the succubus in chat. So we do have a knockback.
Rip succubus. No, it doesn't have. It doesn't have the knockback.
They
anymore.
removed
It's
it.
only
They removed the
seduction nowadays,
knockback.
so
Oh my
They removed
god.
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
a
that's
lot
the
of
problem.
people were mad about that in PvP.
I'm
A
mad
lot
about
of
it because it was great for Sanguine, man. It was a good Mythic
Yeah.
Plus tool, and they just took it
True.
out.
I mean, the whiplash just slows now. Huh? That's
Just
it.
as slow.
Yeah.
That's all it
Yeah,
does.
exactly.
It's
To be
awful.
fair, it's a really powerful slow for PvP,
It is.
but it's not whiplash. No.
Alright, so corruption, literally everything, and
hmm
hope you've got
I'm
enough
seeing-
knockbacks.
I'm seeing a reoccurring theme here.
Well, let's talk about another guy that's got a lot of multi-dot.
Gahoon.
What are you talking about? It's a single target fight. In phase 2 and phase 3, right?
So,
I don't know. Yeah, you go.
Go ahead. Go ahead. What do you think?
I was just about to say, obviously, with the cheesing, Affliction was really good. But if that would be possible, I think Destruction was also a really nice spec there. I mean, I tested it out, yeah. Like, Destruction is really good there as well, but yeah, with Inevitable Demise, I mean, I guess everyone know what Xav was speaking of with the multi-dotting on the left and the right side, so we have just so much drain life to do, which will be just insane. And I guess that's why you said also with the 15% nerf, he would still be good.
Mm-hmm.
And we will be just doing incredible damage on the ad in the second phase, which is nice because the ad has to die as fast as possible. I mean, in my opinion, the boss has quite a lot of movement involved. Also, the last phase with this earthquakes, there's like a mechanic that is basically like the mythic Akimon phase with the green patterns, just that there's like mushrooms on the ground that you have to dodge. I mean, Affliction is just like the perfect spec for like how the fight works, at least right
Yep.
now. So whatever like the boss throws against you, you have something like to counter with, and yeah, it's just a really good Affliction fight.
Not to
Except the
mention-
first phase, I would say.
Yeah, the first phase isn't that great, but I feel like that phase isn't that big of a deal in the general sense of the fight. Not to mention the fact that there's a damage amp in the fight, and Affliction just happens to have the best 3-minute cooldown in the game. So it's just
Yeah, cooldown
So-
management will be a
Could-
big thing.
Does the qualification 3-minute matter? Is there like a 5 or
sorry.
plus minute that's
Sorry,
stronger?
best cooldown in the game. There you go.
True. But yeah, I agree. The first phase will probably be not a big issue for the people that never played the fight. It's just like you basically like have on the left and right side like some Titan orbs that you need to bring to like some machine. If you do it often enough, he phases. And like the first phase is basically just killing a few tentacles and like a big guy. And from the big guy, you can even snack a damage buff if you stand close and melee to him. If you get it twice, you will get mind control, and after mind control, you're dead. As far as I can remember. So basically, in that phase, you will be arguably a bit weaker than other specs, just because like your dots will probably be not completely like ticking the entire time because it just dies way too fast. But second phase is pure single target with like one blood ad spawning every. Do you still know how often it came, Xyro? Also 30 seconds, 40 seconds?
It's like every 30 or 40 seconds. which
Something
is-
around that,
yeah.
which you will just destroy. And in the last phase, it's basically like pure single target with, in my opinion, a lot of movement involved, and like you need to turn yourself every here and then because like he's doing like a gaze that fears you. So yeah, it is like a really good Warlock fight, and you can like use the gateway, even though the gateway isn't as strong, perhaps depending how this new mythic ability works with like this weird beam that came recently into the dungeon journal.
Mhm.
If you're holding the orb, I don't know if you saw it already, Xyro, but there
Mhm.
will be like some kind of beam when you are holding the Titan orb that will follow you. So it could arguably spawn even in the way of the gateway and damage you. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we really know how that works. That's going to be interesting.
Yikes.
I mean, I'm happy that the gateway works itself because it's still obviously a good gain.
hmm
But yeah, I mean, could be not as strong as you would expect in first place, perhaps.
All right, so let's briefly talk about. We've got the coin. We got the coin gods that we have to pray to every week. Where are you going to be coining?
I think Mithrax is probably one of the best bosses to coin. You've got a trinket, you've got a haste mastery ring, you have your an Azurite chest, which is just strong in general, and the offhand is also
offhand.
haste mastery. So just all 4 good pieces. If you get something, you're gonna be happy.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, like, what do you really want out of the raid? Arguably, like weapons and trinkets, or perhaps like Azurite pieces. But I mean, you need to obviously check what you got already in the M+ week and what you will loot in the heroic by itself. But I mean, like, yeah, definitely Mythrax is like a really good option.
Yeah.
I don't know. Azul weapon and inevitable demise head.
Yeah.
Azul is also really good.
So one thing I wanted to touch on is the items that you're likely to be using the stacking reorigination raid nerf thing on, and it looks like it's probably going to be the chest because of the traits available in the raid, you have the chest only has the seed of corruption on it, and it's the only chest that drops in the raid. So you get that chest, and that's probably going to be your reorigination raid buff thingy slot. So that makes Zul really worthwhile. You get the stacking buff thing, you get the weapon. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Sol and Mythrax are like the safe 2 coins that you would use, like, and I don't know. Then it just kind of depends for what you're really going for. I mean, Fetid has a weapon and a head as well, but like the headpiece, I don't know, the Dreadful Calling is mediocre, or? I mean, it's only worth if you get an extra Dark Lair in.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, the weapon is not the best stats, so if you really go for that one, I don't know.
There are better Mythic plus weaponry, right? So
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
at least pray to the
The,
box and Titan. Can weapons
the
Titan
only-
Forge now?
Nope, they can only Warforge, only +10 on weapons. That's it.
+10. So,
the only items that you're not going to be getting from Mythic Plus though are the Azurite slots. So you're
Right.
probably looking to get those from raid for the ones that have good traits, or just holding on to 340s if the traits are powerful
You
enough.
just loot 3 in your weekly chest.
Yeah, just get
Isn't
lucky.
that how it works?
Just
Isn't
loot
that
3 in the weekly chest.
but like imagine, yeah, you just open your chest, you see like
But
3 pieces.
but on that note, Gahoon's shoulders do have decent traits for affliction. They have Cascading Calamity and Laser Matrix, which are like okay. They're not terrible, but they're not amazing. So it might be a case where like the item level on a Gahoon shoulder is worth using over your 340 ID or whatever. It also drops a staff. Though the trinket is terrible, so I would be looking to coin probably the last 3 bosses personally on heroic at least.
You only got
right?
2 coins on beta.
You only
Yeah,
get 2?
that was
Oh
the-
shit.
True, they changed it. You're right.
I
Oh,
thought that was
okay,
the
well
thing.
then Zul and Mithrax
Zul
are
and
probably
Mithrax,
your coins if you're doing heroic, but I know a lot of people are probably going to be holding off for Mythic week to be coining the Mythic bosses the first couple. Trying to get a Mythic weapon. That's always a good strategy, is just hold your coins on the first week if you know you're going to go Mythic. And then just drop them all on the first 3 bosses to try and get a weapon and some decent items. And then, I don't know, that leaves you with 1, so you probably coin Heroic Mithrax to try and get a trinket.
Yep. That's the only like before the icicle change, I was considering, it might be worthwhile coining that just because it's Arcano 2.0. It's that good.
Yeah.
But after the nerf, no, I don't think it's worth it. It was almost not worth using just because of the small chance of it even happening at all. Heroic Myth is the only Heroic Week coin that's even worth considering, in my opinion.
All right. Any last thoughts on the raids before we move on?
Not on a raid, but just on Affliction, please.
Yeah, don't. It's fine. Don't nerf it. Our AoE is bad, Blizzard. Don't nerf us again.
Oh my
Forehead.
god.
I mean, if you take me down and take Rogues down as well. That is my wish.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. If they nerf Affliction, they have to nerf Sub.
And Outlaw.
Nerf,
And Outlaw.
nerf sub.
And Assassination.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right.
Small side tangent, really quick.
Okay, here we go.
I love a thing that the rogue community does that the warlocks also do, and it seems like pretty prevalent across the WoW community. It's like when you're playing a pure and all 3 of your specs are like in the top 5 specs in the game, but then the community says that the worst one is unplayable.
Yeah.
Assassination's so bad, guys. It's only better than like basically everything else in the game.
It's only better than the other 33 specs in the game.
Yeah, don't nerf us. Just make every other spec better and do that.
There we go.
I like that.
I like that idea.
That's the feels good man strategy.
All right. Okay, so let's go on to Q&A. We've been talking about raids and Mythic Plus a bunch. So we have a couple of questions here. Gojax wants to know, with Demo Azerite traits being arguably the worst of the 3 specs, do you think they should just change current traits, or how would you fix it otherwise? Gato, go. How would you fix Demo traits?
I think that demo traits aren't as problematic as people think. I think the issue is mostly that other
It's bad.
specs in the game have traits that are just clearly way better than the generic traits. Like the tuning is just bad across the board for like all of the specs in the game for the traits right now. And most specs have like at least one trait that's like randomly 5% of their DPS, and it's just like, okay, cool. And Demo just has like kind of balanced traits that are comparable to the generic ones. They should probably be buffed a little bit because, you know, ideally you want like some incentive to take the spec specific ones over like a generic one, right? Like it's fine if you do a little bit less so that you don't have to reforge, but the spec one should be a bit better, right? Now, they're not really right now, so maybe just buff like all of Demo's traits across the board by a bit. But I think the bigger issue is that like Destruction has Crashing Chaos, which is stupid, and Affliction has Racking Brilliance and Inevitable, which are stupid, and every rogue spec has something stupid, and mages have stupid stuff, and just every other spec has at least one trait that's just like, this should be nerfed.
And then Demo is just like, increases your hand to Gul'dan damage.
Yeah, demos are just balanced, and that's not cool in WoW because balanced things suck.
I think there's a pretty interesting trend amongst most of the Azerite traits for all of the available DPS specs right now, where in general, Thunderous Blast is just like the highest simming single target trait for every single spec in the game, except for like 2. Like Sub-Rogue and Windwalker Monk have absolutely insane traits.
That's
I think
so
Windwalker's is actually a lot worse, but what it comes down to is where underneath those high-end traits do your actual spec-specific traits come in, and do you actually have traits that are good in certain situations, like Inevitable Demise? And Affliction has that right now, and a lot of other classes just don't.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Demo.
That's one thing to note about Demo. A lot of Demo's traits just completely miss the mark, like hard casting Demon Fire or Demon Bolt, whatever the hell it's called now. It's just that trait's why? Why does that exist? I don't. Blizzard, nobody liked fire bracers. Why?
I love them.
You loved them when it made you do 15% more than everyone.
Yeah.
That was fun. Except these ones don't, so it's just like they're barely even worth casting single target.
All right. Where's the Muffin last? That's the guy's name. Asks, any trinkets or gear catch your eye that might be beneficial for one spec or the other? Obviously, you've got the Azerite pieces that have Inevitable Demise on them that are pretty good. But anything other than that?
In general, we missed one trinket while going over the dungeons. The good trinkets out of dungeons are there's one in Tol de Gore. It's Ignition Mage's Fuse, which is pretty good for just like most specs in the game across the board, unless you really hate haste. It's the
Name
it's
a
just
spec that hates haste.
I don't know.
I'll wait.
Probably there's probably one. I don't.
I
It
think
used to be
Mystical Monk.
bleed specs, but then bleeds taste now, so I don't know. Either way, um, Ignition Mage's Fuse from Toll de Gore is really good. Just a stacking haste buff gives you a lot of stats. The Balefire Branch out of Waycrest Manor, and what was the other one?
The conch from Shrine.
Oh yeah, Conch is decent. It's not very good for Warlocks because crit is kind of bad for us across the board, but it's like decent.
Yeah, it's
And
just
what
a
you'll
solid
find,
stat. It's essentially a solid stat
yeah,
stick.
what
if you need
what
one.
you'll find is basically any trinket that's just like a stat and then a stat proc is pretty good across the board for like whether that's like Titan forging a world quest trinket or from dungeons or whatever. If it's just stats, it's good. And if it in any way involves like a damage proc, it's unusable and never look at it.
To the
That's my TLDR for
to
trinkets.
the
Like,
shredder bot with those.
yeah, just if it involves the trinket dealing damage, it's bad and you shouldn't use it.
All right.
True.
Tuning last. How do you think Blizzard is? How well do you think Blizzard has handled tuning specs and fixing bugs? And do you feel that the general feedback and information about Blizzard issues that we've been giving has been sufficient?
Well, hey, I mean, Feral got like a 1% buff or something, so PogChamp.
Finally got that after release.
I know,
Oh,
I was
God.
just a bit in shock when like I saw how broken some trades are for some classes
Mhm.
after the
Yeah.
beta period. I know, like looking at like the numbers, how big like some trades got nerfed. I know, like that this even goes live like this, and even now, like I mean, like right now it's still like a gamble. What will really happen? Like to, for example, Affliction, will they destroy it in some kind of way? Will they buff like the other Warlock specs? I don't know. But
Right.
I wouldn't even really know what Blizzard else should do. Like it's not that they could like have every week like a post. Yeah, we think of buffing this, nothing this. I don't know.
I just know, like, from all the stuff that I've heard from my guild right now, is the most annoying thing right now is how about every 2 days your Azurite traits have gotten reshifted, right? And that's been actually really annoying. And a lot of that just kind of comes down to the fact that we finally got to test those 3 days before launch. Piece with the best traits, and then the next day hotfix rolls out, and oh, it's actually like 5 or 6 now.
That's also with trinkets, like someone wrote in the
Right.
chat, yeah. Like so many trinkets like, yeah, it's good. No, it's not good. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, it's good now. But I scrapped it yesterday. I mean,
Yeah.
he's kind of right.
Four
Like,
times buff.
Mariketh's,
Oh wait, no.
unusable, then we tripled
No,
its
no.
damage, then we cut its damage in half.
Right, and it's just frustrating when these hot fixes just kind of get rolled out, and I mean at like 7 p.m. on a Thursday, when you're like, all right, we ran through our mythics, we sharded the things that are bad, and oh shit, it's not bad anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've found that as they've been progressively nerfing overpowered traits, the balance of specs has been getting better and better. But the
Yep.
tuning at launch was absolutely ridiculous, and it still is because
Right.
they've only hit like a quarter of the OP traits. Like Windwalker still has OP stuff, Arcane still has OP stuff, Outlaw and Subtlety have OP stuff. The Ret has OP stuff. I just even seismic thing the seismic wave for arm whatever it's called is still like a good trait for AoE. Like it's still fine. It's just you're not like the number one in the game by 50% now. It's like there's just so many traits that are still absolutely ridiculous that they exist in the state that they're in. It honestly feels like they just don't even do dungeons. Like none of the devs play dungeons or something because it's just even from Mythic Zeros, it's so obvious
Right.
that there are so many traits that are just completely batshit.
Right. All right. Magic Elephant Last wants to know, do you think that the current trend with the non-spec specific Azurite traits being stronger, is that intended? And if it is, do you agree with the design? And it's kind of a resounding, it's a bad, right? It's a
Well, I
bad.
think it's actually kind of smart, right? Because it covers up how shitty their balancing is. Because if your class has bad traits, you can at least
Yeah.
just use Thunder's Blast to do good damage with, right?
Yeah.
I
Like
think it's fine.
when Thunderous Blast is like so far ahead single target of other traits that it's like it's just comparable to AoE traits on AoE. Just pick that one, and then it's like you always do good damage. You don't have to think about it, and you never have to worry if the trait's just gonna be completely unusable. Like I don't know, say a trait that reduces the cooldown of Dark Glare by 1 second.
I think it's kind of horrible that there's anyway like general like traits across all classes, because I don't know, perhaps I remember wrong, but these traits were supposed to be like our substitute for tier sets in some
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
regard, and like for the missing artifact passive traits. And I
Yeah.
mean,
The intent is that it's supposed to be like an amalgam of Legion
yeah,
that was
exactly.
just too much, and people hated that there was so much of it. So
And
you
like I
have
don't know,
sets
most
and legendaries and artifact passives, and all of those are just kind of they tried to bake them all into Azurite.
yeah, exactly. But like I feel like perhaps unless like except now something like inevitable demise, like I don't really have to adjust my playstyle much, or like it doesn't really change like a tier set did at times. I mean, let's say for example the best trade is a destruction with the crashing chaos. It's like OP as fuck, but like in the end, what does change? Like I still use like the chaos worlds either way, and they just hurt a bit more.
Well,
Like or even Thunderous Blast or something. I don't know. Like
I
for me as
I
a
think
player, there's nothing that changes.
there is like it doesn't change your rotation, but there is some thought that goes into it beforehand, right? And I'm not opposed to like the system of Azurite in general. I just think that it's poorly implemented in a lot of cases, and a lot of specs just have absolute trap traits that are never worth taking in any situation. Like Dreadful Calling and Seed of Corruption are just if you ever take those, you are inting yourself,
I
and
mean,
they're
perhaps there's arguably again too many, yeah? Like, that's how I felt, perhaps. Like, just have less of them, but properly balanced, and I don't know,
yeah.
it's fine.
Well,
I
in
don't
that
know.
note, a lot of that has to do with the current balancing of things. If inevitable demise wasn't a thing, and you're playing an Affliction Warlock, and you want to do good AoE damage, you could absolutely
Yes.
spec Sow the Seeds and run Triple Death Loom. You would do really good AoE damage. You actually would, but you you just don't because ID is ridiculous.
Let's
So
see. I've been telling people for a while that Affliction AoE is probably fine, and with gear it's going to be a lot better because we have stupid AoE mastery scaling. But my issue with Affliction AoE compared to the other specs is that you lose massive amount of damage on bosses for actually doing
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
But I, eh, I don't know. The tuning across the board for all of them is hilarious. It's just.
Okay. Solar Power Last. We got a three-part question here. With Raids and Mythoplex coming, how do you guys feel about the way Blizzard does balancing? Example, the tuning passes at the start of the tier. Do you feel that's acceptable? So we're all kind of expecting some sort of tuning patch to hit sometime between Tuesday the 4th and Monday the 10th. Likely Monday the 10th, because
Yeah.
why would you not release major balance changes the night before Mythic starts?
I've I've long criticized this system, and I absolutely detest it because it just shows a complete lack of like actually trying to understand how the specs in their game play. And what happens every expansion is coming out of beta, since Legion, I should say, because Mythic Plus didn't really exist before that, give or take. You had challenge mode, but anyway. Everything gets completely gutted coming out of beta based on dungeons now, right? Anything that was good in dungeons just gets completely ruined. Like in the case of Destruction and Demo, right? Some of them don't because they just decide that at random. And then they just leave it there for 3 weeks, and then Heroic Week happens, and they just look at the data from Heroic Week and completely change all of the balance in the game based on that. And they don't consider things like the fact that no one is playing Demonology. No one. Even if it's like an okay spec, no one's playing it. So maybe it looks like it's just terrible when it's not, which was the case for like most of last expansion, right? But the way that they tune things, it triggers me. And
I'm just always scared that they delete my class. Yeah, I mean,
like it's
you
not
never know.
fun. It's not fun for them to not communicate anything, right? I think that's the biggest issue with Blizzard's balancing in general, is that they just don't tell their players anything, to the point where there's like it feels like from members of the theory crafting community that there's like an active attempt within Blizzard to like not give their players information. It's not like they're just not giving out information. It's like they're actively trying to suppress your ability to understand how the game works, right? Just, God. I really hope that I don't log in Tuesday of Mythic Week and Affliction has been nerfed by 20% and then I just AFK until like the last 3 bosses of the raid where I'm somewhat used, right? Like
that's the thing. Like they
that
say
sucks.
they would like with this kind of tuning never like delete a class, but like it
But
still
they
happens
do
from
They
time
all
do
to
the
time.
time.
They do all the time.
It still
Hey,
happens from time to time, and I mean, like I guess
XD.
obviously it's for people like for Xeronic or me a bit worse even because like you just prepare in like method, okay, this is kind of what we want to roll with, and then it's like, okay, boys, that's not anymore what we are rolling with. And like especially in that kind of guilds, it's not like, yeah, you are still the better player, you will play, yeah. If your class is fucking shit and you don't have an ult that actually fits then in your meta, you're just out of the question. And you're like, you never know. And especially right now, yeah. It's always, I felt like it was always like this on a beta. Like you're the god on a beta, like since Legion at least. Then like the game hits, you're shit, and at some point you're good again. Or like right now you're somewhat good or like really good even as Affliction, and then you just know in your head they will overdo it because they don't
Yeah.
know actually what to nerf or like how to nerf properly the spec. And then it turns out that it's so bad and afterwards that you need to hope for the next tier to be good again. And
Yeah.
like a spec class like Warlock, Rogue, Hunter or something with 3 specs, you can't tell me that you can't manage one spec good enough that you at least be able to take like 2 of them. Like beginning of the Legion, I felt like so sad that like I mean I revolted the first time in my life because they didn't manage to fix either of the 3 specs. And in my opinion,
Oh
that is
yeah,
just not.
Nighthold was or sorry, not
And like
Nighthold.
Emerald Nightmare was awful.
EN
like
was a
that is
butthole.
just something for me to be honest not acceptable in 2017 2018 anymore, or like back then it was 2016. They know like by the time nowadays they should know how to like balance classes, yeah. And like a pure DPS class can't be like across the board shit. How is that possible? How do you not
Like,
manage to make one spec good?
so I think the Legion example is a bit unfair because Demo did have good single target and Destro was good on the only actually relevant fight in the entire raid.
Demo
But
was good if you were lucky enough to actually get the
yeah,
2 bis legendaries.
yeah.
Nobody was getting Demo legendaries because nobody was
There was a
doing that.
shit ton of RNG with legendaries that skewed everything, and on top of that, it was like you just didn't get invited to Mythic Plus at all. So it didn't matter if Destro was a good spec in Emerald Nightmare if you had the gear, because no one accepted Warlocks to do Mythic Plus for the entire start of the expansion. So it was just like even though Destruction might have been a good spec in EN, no one had a geared Warlock. And that kind of persisted because everybody re-rolled the Shadow Priest, right? and nobody like maintained their Warlock after that. Like all the Warlocks just jumped ship to Shadow, and
And it was
nobody
just so
had
horrible
geared
to play.
Warlocks.
Yeah, it was just so horrible to play though. That was the problem. Not even the
And
numbers. It
and
was
then
just
like
the fun.
even in raids after that where Warlocks were like, okay, on this fight Warlocks are good. It's like, but I don't have a geared Warlock, so I'll just play my Shadow Priest again, right? Like
Yeah. And
You know what was actually really funny about Emerald Nightmares? Demonology was really, really good on scenarios.
yeah,
Yeah,
when
Soul,
you
Soul
could just
Link,
load
you
on
were immortal. You were
scenarios.
immortal on that fight compared to other classes because of
Yeah.
Soul Link.
Yeah, I guess.
But
But, like-
nobody.
Well,
had
nobody
Nobody
played
other
it.
than not had
Nobody
a,
played it
had
on
a demo lock.
progression.
Nobody but
I-
not had a demo lock that had any gear, so
But
That's true. I mean, I know Xerbo was like a bis equipped destruction, yeah. Like you could do also with that good damage on scenarios, but
oh yeah,
I don't know, you just. I mean, one Warlock was like the max, yeah, and even that Warlock had to be lucky. But like when we are speaking about tuning, it's like somewhat off topic in that regard, but like it's the same what I don't understand in the BFA now why 5 classes in a game only have a buff or like a debuff application on the bosses with like the Demon Hunter, Monk, Warrior, Priest,
fantasy.
and Mage thing. Like they literally take my Curse of Elements and like my entire demo and give it Demon Hunter, and like I don't know why you make it like mandatory to give like 5 classes in a raid, yeah. But I guess that kills our limit of time.
but
eventually.
health stones no longer stack with the health pot cooldown.
Yeah, one Warlock is mandatory
Yeah.
too, pretty much. But
Yeah, but I just don't understand why do you give like these 5 classes exactly something? Like
yeah, it's bad.
I mean the Demon Hunter class fantasy at this point is just taking abilities that were Warlock abilities.
I mean, in the
So-
beginning of the beta, everyone had something, and it was planted. Everyone gets
like-
something, and it was fine. But like now, it's just like okay,
Here's the
some
thing.
have, some not.
I think it would have made a lot more sense if all of the specs that gave buffs weren't pures, right? Like if none of them were pures, I think it would be less egregious to me. But like why the fuck do mages who have like never been bad in a raid tier once ever, and I will argue with anyone who disagrees with that,
Fight him.
like how does that get a fucking 10% intellect buff?
They're not
Like,
good this
why?
time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it. Like I just had very rather that like there is 5 buffs, but like there's like 2-3 classes each that like cover one. Yeah, like it used to be back then with like arguably like having a hunter that can cover like a lot more or something.
Yeah, give
But
us
like
Dark Intent.
I just don't get it right now. Yeah, like
Old
I-
Dark
I'm-
Intent.
I'm
Cata Dark
less-
Intent.
I'm less mad about it if it's like the Rets of the world, right? The Rets, the Havocs, the specs where like
enhance
if
or
you get
something.
nerfed, if your spec gets nerfed, you either re-roll or you're not brought to the raid, right? Like I'm kind of okay with those classes specs bringing like a debuff. So like even if they just completely ream Havoc and you spent an entire month preparing to play Havoc in Mythic and then they nerf it by like 20%. At least maybe you justify your raid spot with a fucking 5% aura or something. But
yeah, these classes
but,
I
like-
agree. Yeah, like why not a feral shaman? Yeah, it's this kind of things like that are just usually weak. To give them at least something, but like mage, I agree with you. Yeah, like when was
What?
mage ever really
Why?
bad? Like I don't know.
Class
even
fantasy.
even in tiers where they don't do good DPS, which there have been some, Ice
Yes, and
Block
then-
exists.
Yeah, there's always at least one of them usually. But yeah.
I don't know.
Zyro, tell us how fun it was playing your Warlock on all the end bosses of the last expansion.
And bosses in the last expansion?
That was the meme. You played Mage on like every single one.
I played Warlock for half the expansion.
I know,
mean-
but yet all the end boss kills you were on your
Oh
Mage.
yeah, no, I guess that's true. I only played Warlock on one end boss. I only played Warlock on what was it? Kill Jaden?
Which is
I don't know, man.
which is
Yeah,
really
it was
funny.
bad.
All right, that was a nice tangent. We got one more question. Gato, tell us, do you think Affliction is going to scale out of control, or is there something they can do to prevent that as the expansion goes on?
I think for AoE, yes, but outside of AoE, probably not. And the reasoning for that, it doesn't have anything to do with modifiers. there's like this thing in the Warlock community that's been going around about like modifiers and like percentage damage stacking effects and stuff, and that's not really why Affliction scaled out of control. It's entirely based in secondary stat values, right?
Mhm.
And the entire issue with Affliction scaling last expansion was perdition. Like literally that was it. Like the fact
Rest
that,
in pieces.
well, I should say haste scaled stupidly well too, but crit across the board for warlocks now is just bad. Like it's basically the same as versatility, and versatility also damage reduction. So in general, you kind of even want to prioritize verse over crit right now. But it like the reason that it was good last expansion was perdition, which was a trait that increased the critical damage of all of your damage over time effects. And what that did was take a stat that would normally be kind of bad, like on the level of versatility, and elevate it to the level of its two other OP stats. So whereas most specs in the game have generally speaking two stats that are really powerful for them, and then like two kind of mediocre or bad stats in general across the board. Affliction had three. And that caused big issues later in the expansion where like all three of its good secondary stats you could reasonably expect to just not get any versatility on gear, and just every piece would have crit, haste, and mastery, and it would just do shit tons of damage at the end of the expansion because it all feeds back on itself, right? So it's not going to happen again. Like you're not going to start out weak on bosses and then eventually at the end of the expansion do like absolutely obscene
Infinity
things on
damage.
them. But I do want to note that there is some really disgusting mastery scaling for AoE, particularly now that it also scales corruption. Like
And Phantom Singularity. That's the thing.
yeah,
They
like
just decided to put it on all of our dots now instead
mastery
of
is
just
just
the free
like
ones.
all of your stuff now. So it's just really disgustingly powerful. I have a very strong feeling that like when we have 2,000-3,000 mastery a tier from now, Affliction AoE is going to go from being bad to guess we're so seed spam again, boys. Right? But I don't know. I
This
haven't
is
looked at the
the
numbers on that too much. That's just a feeling that I have, and I know we all hate.
this is the spec that I came here for.
You want to see how much mastery I have right now?
0.
Sure, buddy. Tell
I'll
us.
put a screenshot in chat. That's my mastery right now. It's pretty good.
I think I'm at 1,000.
All right, so that I think was everything. We're gonna go last thoughts one at a time. We're gonna go with Deep Shades because you haven't talked at all in a while. So, what are your thoughts coming into rating and Mythic Plus? Go.
My thoughts about it
Yeah.
as a Warlock.
Yeah. Other
I
than
mean, if
please no
everyone,
nerf.
well, if everything stays like right now, I think it will be pretty fine as the Warlock. Even though I'm not looking forward to just playing Affliction again all over like Legion, where you and like just keep dotting an M plus, yeah, like every trash spec, just keep your dots up. I wish they would somehow manage to get the other two specs also a bit better. That are my thoughts, like that they actually make the other two also viable.
All right, Zyro. You playing Mage?
Yeah. Actually, I'm playing Rogue. I'm playing Rogue.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But dude, I'm a Fodom guy now. Just I'm sticking to Warlock until it's not good anymore. Then I'm out of here. Betrayer V2.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts though going into rating and Mythic Plus?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I would be really surprised if Affliction doesn't get a small nerf going in the middle of Heroic Week. You know, honestly, if I had to guess what they would do, they'd probably do something like a 5% across the board nerf, and they'd nerf Dark Glare to like 6 seconds or something. That'd be completely
But
reasonable.
5% would
Yeah.
be too. Really?
That'd be completely reasonable.
Yeah. Honestly, like if they just nerf Affliction by 5%, fine with that, and I feel like it kind of needs it because it does absolutely absurd things right now. But
Yeah, well, and I think that
I
6
feel
second
like
Dark Glare was something I was mulling over as well.
I haven't done the numbers on that, and it's something I can look into later. But I would imagine that Dark Glare is still really powerful at 6 seconds.
It
Like
is.
just the mechanic of being able to dump 5 UAs onto a target and then extend all of them is extremely powerful. And if you look at it right now, what Dark Glare is you get 5 UAs for free, right? That's what it is,
Yeah, that's true.
and that's a bit too powerful.
But I'm holding out right now because Fire Mage was busted for all of Legion Beta, and they just didn't touch it at all going into World Nightmare. So there's a chance
Shadow
they just
Priest would
don't do
like a word
anything.
with you.
Yeah, same with Shadow. I mean, everyone said Surrender is not gonna be okay, and it kept being.
Yeah.
Hey devs,
It's just
surrender
nice.
is an issue, and it doesn't get touched for 2 raid tiers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it actually stayed like this till including Nighthold, yeah? That this
It was still
happened.
like a Nighthold, yeah. It was still OP in
Like,
Nighthold.
Surrender was it was like it wasn't OP anymore, but it was like on Augur, it was still stupid
Yeah, I
because it was
mean, yeah,
execute.
I still know when we did like the Augur with Serenity, who plays the 4th Shadow? Who's coming in voice? Like,
So I don't know. Maybe Affliction survives, but
But I wouldn't be surprised to see a small nerf or even a bigger nerf. I mean, who knows what they're going to do at this point? It's just like, how many devs actually want to play Affliction Warlock at this tier? That's really what it comes down to.
it would be just nice if they actually do a nerf, they would compensate also the other specs by a bit, yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Like, especially now, like that Havoc got nerfed so hard as a destruction, it should be somewhat easy to fix the single target damage, in my opinion. It is.
Yep.
All right.
So-
So I think that's everything that we had. Any other thoughts, Gato?
I did kind of want to touch on Pyre's question.
Okay.
It is loaded, as you said,
It
but
is
like
a melee question.
but like we don't have to go too far into it. It just like broad strokes. The general idea of his question is that um, Mythic Plus is taking a bigger role in the community right now, right? Like people are moving. Like not everyone's focusing on raiding anymore. A lot of people are dungeon friends, right? And there's not really an effective way to like simulate Mythic Plus. And when you just tell people like it's these talents are good because we've tested them and they're good, it doesn't feel as satisfying as like we have hard numbers that these are good, right? And his question is kind of along the lines of how do you how do you look at Mythic Plus and analyze things like talents and traits and gear going into a dungeon and which ones you want to use, etc., right? Like based on your group comp and all of that stuff. How do you look at a dungeon and then choose which talents you're going to play? And I think in general on my end right now, it's pretty easy because it seems like not just for warlocks, like most of the specs in the game, at least half of the talents are just unusable. Like they're just straight absolute garbage right now for most of the specs in the game. So it's pretty easy to just like take Deathbolt, AC, PS Haunt, and then the only thing you ever think about is Creeping Death, Dark Soul, Misery, right? And it basically just comes down to looking at a dungeon, maybe getting a few keys under your belt, getting experience with how your group likes to pull it, and then determining whether or not you think you need more trash damage or more boss damage. It's just like that's like pretty much the only choice you have as Affliction right now.
And pretty much when it comes to dungeons, there are like sort of 3 major areas you have to look out. Number 1 is, does your group have enough AoE damage? Number 2, do you have enough priority damage to make sure things die when they need to? And number 3, can you deal with the bosses? And you need to try to fit the role that will make the group better. If you're running with 2 sub-rogues as an Affliction lock, you're not going to play Inevitable Demise. You're probably not going to play Affliction at all. You're probably going to play like Destro or Demo.
Yeah.
But it's entirely
Frostmage.
viable to go sow the seeds and get 3 triple Death Bloom traits if you're running with 2 sub-rogues, because that would be your role in that group. You'd be the AoE damage guy, because the sub-rogues will take care of all the priority damage. You just need to look at the group you're with and accurately figure out what it is you need to do.
Cool.
I feel like that was a pretty concise.
That was great. So
I mean, it was even a good example back then in
Yeah.
Legion, or like things like Eye of Ashara, where you could arguably just play the single target spec to actually destroy like the bosses,
yeah,
Uldir,
while
Drainsoul,
whatever
Thief.
your warrior or your monk in the end, I think was the most OP class, just does like the AoE, yeah. Like, I mean, okay, you're perhaps shit in the meta then in the overall in the end, but like, who cares if you fucking finish the key, yeah? Like, that what's it's about.
doesn't matter.
Well,
Brought execute to the last boss.
Yeah. Well, that's why when I see in the Affliction channel, my AoE damage sucks, my AoE damage sucks. Yeah, you're playing a priority target damage class. You're one of the best specs in the game for Mythic Plus. Priority damage is like one of the most important things. That's why sub rogues are so strong. Because
Yeah,
they're an Affliction lock, but they also bring Shroud and Cloak and a bunch of CC.
Yeah.
that was also the. Oh yeah, you go.
No, I'm done.
I mean, that was also the crazy thing right now. Yeah, I guess you experience this a lot as well. People come to the stream, or my Warlock is so shit. Like Frost Mage is beating me in AOE or Demon Hunters, and I'm like, dude, it's like M0s. Obviously, they will destroy like with their burst classes, and you just destroy them
These
on
mobs
bosses.
These
Yeah.
mobs that die in 4 seconds don't have time for my UA to deal damage.
Yeah,
Man, this
exactly.
spec
And like,
sucks.
you're just destroying everyone on bosses, and later and plus you will do like the same damage on
You
trash.
have
Like,
to
Right.
you have to
and then
keep
you'll
in mind that
burst.
if a target is dying in 4 seconds while you're doing no damage to it, you don't need to do damage to it. Like
yeah.
that.
I mean, the only class where I would really say like, okay, where it feels really disappointing is like a rogue that can nowadays do like everything, prio and like AoE.
Right.
But like otherwise, you as a warlock
Rogues
are
are
completely fine,
fine.
yeah. Like you have your niche, you're like arguably one of the best or even the best in your niche, and later and plus you will be more than a fine class if everything stays like it is right now.
Yeah.
So just calm down and okay,
Yeah.
you have 3 shitty weeks in M0 and then you become one of the best again. So calm down.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, especially because
Alright.
you can 20k burst a boss. No big deal.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, that was great. That was a great, great question. Glad you picked that up, Gato. So I guess this is it for the show. Thank you so much for coming in. Gato, do you have any shout outs, call outs?
Same old, same old. Everyone that helps the Warlock Discord maintain and run the community. So all of the people with the council role, basically. They knew who they are.
Zyro, call outs? Do you have anyone to call out specifically?
I don't want to be toxic, so no.
Oh,
Yeah,
resisted
I'll
the
call
bait.
out the people who take the information from the community. Heck, you guys,
Heck.
and use it without consent. No, nothing crazy.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
And then Deep Shades, thanks for coming on. You got any call out shout outs?
yeah, thanks for the invite. Then obviously to the Lost Boys, making my life easier, just posting the link in the stream and not explaining anything by myself.
Excellent.
And like, and everyone good luck in the next raid. I mean, especially you, Xaro. I guess you guys go ham as well.
Yeah, it's looking like it, man. It's gonna be fun.
Awesome. We're looking forward to the Russians beating everything on Wednesday night. So, all right. Thanks so much for coming out, guys. Thanks for watching. And we will announce the next show sometime in the next couple weeks. Thank you.